across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, it's 1:02 and I'm Russell Quirk. I'm in for Ian Collins for one day only. Ian back tomorrow. Coming up in the show over the next 3 hours, there are warnings that Britain could see a repeat of the grooming scandal or last summer's riots if police continue to hide suspects' backgrounds after claims that 2 Afghan asylum seekers with links to an alleged child rape in Nuneaton were covered up. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing a fresh backlash from Labour MPs after Hamas hailed his pledge to recognise a Palestinian state as, inverted commas, one of the fruits of October the 7th. I wonder if you think that Hamas should be rewarded for October the 7th, as it does seem that Keir Starmer is intent on supporting. And Leicestershire and Rutland's Police and Crime Commissioner, former Tory Rupert Matthews, has been unveiled as the latest defector, because he's not a Tory anymore, to Reform UK. That was announced by Nigel Farage in a press conference just now, and he declared the dark heart of wokeness must be cut out of the criminal justice system. Well, what do you think of that? Do you think woke is one of the country's biggest problems, and cutting out the dark heart of wokeness will be a remedy to all our ills? I think it might go some way towards that, don't you? 0344 499 1000. I'm Russell Quirk in for Ian Collins. You can call me and have a chat about whatever takes your fancy, really, whether you agree with what I'm talking about or disagree. Do call 0344 499 1000, or of course you can text TALK, and the number is 87222 by way of text, or you can tweet at talkTV. Voice notes as well, of course, 0344 499 1000 on WhatsApp. They are particularly welcome. And our question of the day is, do we have a right to know a suspect's ethnicity? That's off the back of course, if you think back a year or so, the precursor to these summer riots was the alleged so-called cover-up of the background and ethnicity to the Southport murderer. And of course now we're in a situation where we have 2 Afghani migrants that have been charged, not convicted, so they are innocent until proven guilty, of course, but charged with offences relating to the alleged rape of a 12-year-old girl. And it seems, it's been admitted, it seems, that Warwickshire police sought to cover that up for that ethnicity and the identity, in fact the very crimes or alleged crimes that those 2 individuals are alleged to have committed were covered up by way of councillors and other people in authority in Warwickshire being told not to mention such, for fears, yet again, yes, you've guessed it, of inciting community aggravation, inciting community incohesion. Well, again, thinking back many, many years, in fact going back to the 70s and 80s, they are the very words, the very diktat, the very approach that of course led to the grooming gang scandal and thousands of young white girls being raped by largely Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. It is exactly that type of cover-up that has led to those people being raped. Yet it seems, doesn't it, that the authorities have not learned their lesson. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. I'd like to get your opinion, your comments, or as I say, you can text in 87222 plus the word talk. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined for the first half hour. It's the old Barnesy Quirk act.
Yeah, it
back
is.
Together, the double act that is Barnes. No, actually, it's Quirk Barnes.
Quirk Barnes.
Not Barnes Quirk, actually.
Yeah.
That
A
would be the
Barnes
right way
Quirk
around.
sounds like, yeah, it sounds not good. A Barnes Quirk.
Sounds like a really rubbish publisher.
It sounds like a really bad pub.
Yes. So, look, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You will have lots to say on the following
just a little.
stories. Well, let's talk about this alleged cover-up. This is, again, we need to tread carefully because this is a live case. So this is 2 Afghanistani migrants. They are migrants that came over in boats. They are alleged to have, one of them has actually been charged with rape. The other has been charged with offences relating to conspiracy to rape, effectively. But to be very clear, They are charges. There has been no conviction. There has been no court cases yet. So obviously we need to tread somewhat carefully. Innocent till proven guilty. I think that still applies as one of the bastions.
Is that still a thing?
The British approach, our democracy and constitution. But the bigger story here, apart from the fact, yes, we can all rant and we will rant insofar as if those charges are proven, what that yet again means in terms of the validation of all of these protests across Britain, whether it be Epping, whether it be the Barbican, whether it be Canary Wharf, whether it be Manchester, Newcastle, and growing, I'm afraid. These legitimate protests, largely peaceful, I have to say, and long may they continue, where people are very concerned about not migration, it's not race, it's not brown people, by the way, Narinder Kaur and others. It is because there is a growing propensity, as we're now starting to see evidence and statistics, that some people that come here from other countries have malintent. And actually, some nations that come here as asylum seekers, whether they be fake asylum seekers or otherwise, they do have a higher propensity to commit offences, particularly some nations when it comes to sexual offences, I'm afraid to say. If you don't like them facts, by the way, I'm sorry, but they still remain facts. And again, call in by all means if you want to take me to task, 0344 499 1000, as indeed Jim Dale yesterday tried to on the breakfast show by denying such facts and data. So look, Peter, let's talk about that, and also the point I was going to get to is the cover-up.
Yes.
The fact that we have a police authority, whether it be the Chief Constable, whether it be the Police and Crime Commissioner in Warwickshire, that has seen fit almost to order some kind of informal diktat to the police officers involved in this case, and indeed councillors and others in authority in Warwickshire, not to mention this, not to allow this story, these allegations as they are, to go any further than just being internal. That is sinister.
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Welcome to 1984. The Ministry of Truth has been built. We are living through it. We've somehow built what they call the digital panopticon. So basically it's this idea of we are consistently being watched. It's a prison where it's one guard, a load of cameras, and everybody's watching, but because there's so many cameras that you're aware of, you change your own behaviour. So this is the kind of long-term plan that is finally starting to come to fruition. But you are right, the thing that I find more concerning about this is the cover-up, and then you do have the idea that also this isn't a one-off. We're seeing this up and down the country. Let's not forget, in Southampton, the council CEO was under disciplinary procedures for saying the same thing, to say that don't mention it's asylum seekers.
How high do you think this goes, Peter?
Oh, I think this goes all the way to the very, very top.
When you say the very top, do we think, and we have no evidence whatsoever to back this up, but do we think this comes from government?
I think it at least comes from civil service, at least the top of the civil service. Whether it comes directly from a minister is a very different situation, and if it does, that is a big problem. But it wouldn't surprise me, because again, it is about living in that environment to which somebody feels that this is what they need to do. That is the concern here, is that we've developed an environment where authorities feel that they have the right to, and it is a necessity. That's the dangerous bit, because what it shows is there is no trust, is that the government and our authorities are scared of the public, and a scared authority with that amount of power never ends well.
So our question today, of course, is it ever okay, I guess, for the ethnicity of alleged assailants to be covered up, for those details not to be imparted to us? Of course, we have seen that Southport, unfortunately, is the rather sad, distressing,
there's
and
a very
unfortunate
famous one here in London. There's one here in London. Do you remember the Clapham acid attack?
Yes.
It took the police over, I think it was over 16, 17 hours before they released the fact that the ethnicity of the individual, despite the fact that they said that to stay away from this person because they were dangerous. Well, what did you know he looked like?
But often when it is a white British person, we saw an example recently that it's the first thing that is announced by the police, almost with a sigh of relief, I would suggest, by the police, say, oh, thank goodness it is actually a white British guy from Southampton or wherever, and therefore we don't have to worry about this inciting racial tension or this annoying a certain section of Britain's society. I mean, it is the very epitome of two-tier justice.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the Manchester airport attack, I think, was the birth of two-tier. It really showed that one group gets treated with one set of rules and one's got another. And I think that was laid bare. And I think this really strikes at the heart of everything this government touches, is there is no fairness. The sense of kind of that British understanding of just let everything be cricket. Everybody's got to have a level playing field and let the best person kind of win, and everybody's treated the same. That that does not exist under the Labour Party because they play oppression Olympics, they love identity politics, and they like to comport minorities against each other, which is a big problem, and we're going to see that come up against
Well, and let's talk about another example of that. And there is no way that this example that I'm about to set out to you is not an example of two-tier justice. This is reported in the Telegraph overnight. The headline being, violent anti-racism protester avoids jail for attacking police. This is a woman, by the way, that has been to court not once but twice. Caroline Lenihan, who is described as a left-wing activist. I think it's fair to say that she is. She has avoided jail not once, Peter, but twice. First of all, she attacked someone at a migrant hotel protest that she thought was a racist. It turns out they were a convert to Islam, actually. Oh, wow. So she seemed to have perhaps got that quite wrong, it appears, but also then has been recalled back to court to face charges of also attacking a police officer. Now, if that was somebody of a right wing, and I'd say right wing, not far right, but let's imagine that's someone in an England football shirt outside the Epping Bell Hotel that did a similar thing, and they were deemed as a protester concerned about what was happening locally by way of migrants and the people in that migrant hotel. That person would have been arrested within seconds. They would have been fast-tracked through the justice system, and that person now would be serving a la Lucy Connolly type terms of imprisonment. I remind you, Lucy Connolly, who hopefully will be out of prison soon, received 31 months for an ill-advised tweet. However, Caroline Lenihan, I have to tell you, escapes jail for assault. I'm found guilty, by the way, not once but twice. So this second time she assaulted a female police officer, was also arrested for being drunk and disorderly, so she has a record.
She sounds a delight.
She is a left-wing activist. I would go perhaps further. She sounds like a bit of an anarchist. I don't know about an activist. So she escapes jail. She ended up, Pete, with a 6-month suspended prison sentence. Now, why was that not afforded to all of those people from this summer protests last year? I wonder. I tell you what her mitigating circumstances were. She's pregnant. Now she's pregnant. I mean, I'm not suggesting for a second that Caroline Lenihan got pregnant by way of some strategy to avoid justice, but yeah, maybe you did.
Yeah, so this is the big problem, is that we are comparing two different sentences which are actually not the same law. So it's actually, we have to be very careful about comparing apples and oranges. However, there is an overlying trend here, is that, isn't it funny, they get called an activist, one's called a thug. The language that we're using, the way that these are framed,
is actually the Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, exactly. This is the kind of the point, is that fake news is not lies. Fake news is the framing of arguments and the language they used and how an argument is set out. So the best example is to read an article in The Guardian, read an article in the Daily Mail, and see which bits they prioritise. It's the same thing here that we're seeing in the law. And the more concerning thing on this one is that if you have the right politics, you get to go around punching police officers. Yeah, that is what it looks like to the public.
Her lawyer, Julia Osborne, of course, has stood up and said that she has now reflected on the incident and expresses remorse and regrets the fact that the police officer felt that she was in danger. Well, of course the police officer felt she was in danger. You
not an apology. That is, no, I feel sorry, that's the police officer felt something.
I'm afraid it's mitigation because, of course, by way of sentencing guidelines, if you do show remorse, it helps you in terms of the sentence that you get. And indeed, in Caroline Lenihan's case, that seems to have done the trick. But let me just go into a little bit more detail as regards what this... I'm going to call her a thug, Peter, because
she
it does appear. I mean, she has been convicted.
Yeah, punched a serving police officer in uniform on shift.
Yeah,
that's a thug.
And apparently didn't use the excuse as the Manchester airport guys did. She didn't realise that they were police officers. Maybe she thought they were in fancy dress. Lenihan accused the first person that she assaulted, the person that she believed incorrectly of being a racist, thought he was a racist and a fascist, and therefore attacked him and also incited others to swarm around him and put him in fear of being attacked. Wow. And she's got away with it, Peter.
Yeah,
but there's no such thing as two-tier justice.
Oh, yeah. What was it Lord Harmer said? Lord Hermer, where he said that if you put this argument forward, you're basically worse than the dirt on somebody's shoe kind of thing. He really laid into people. I was like, I'm sorry, this is starting to build. Even if you don't believe that it's done deliberately, the evidence is starting to show that this is a trend, and it's trending in one way. I mean, it's not just here in the law that we're starting seeing two-tier. It is in every aspect of our society. society, whether it be political, legal, or civil society. This kind of...
But it's policing, it's justice, it's media and all sorts. Let's just change gears just very briefly before we go to the first break. Let's talk about Keir Starmer, another misstep by our hapless Prime Minister, I'm afraid. Further to what happened on October the 7th, the terrorist attack by Hamas, we roll forward to today, and under pressure, I suspect we should say, as Keir Starmer is really by the Muslim vote predominantly, particularly now that Jeremy Corbyn has decided to split the left-wing vote with a second party, or another left-wing party. I'll say a second, I mean the Greens and the Lib Dems are
the Greens won't exist now.
It's a split vote. But of course Starmer has suggested, has supported, has said that Palestine should be recognised as a second state, and Hamas have come out and thanked him, rather, actually, and said that that basically is the fruits of October the 7th have been duly delivered, is pretty much what they've said. I mean, how must you feel, and maybe he doesn't feel anything, Keir Starmer, to be a Prime Minister of a Western democracy that effectively has been played by a terrorist organisation that then applauds our Prime Minister for rewarding them?
I think you got this wrong, Russell. I don't think this was a misstep. This was deliberate.
You think this is ideological?
Ideological, of course it was. This is the recognition of the state of Palestine has been in the Labour Party manifesto before I was even born. So
that was a long time ago.
I'm not that old, thank you very much. But this is the point: is that it is the streak within the Labour Party, and I'm sorry, this is starting to look yet again like that stench of anti-Semitism that has not wafted away just because you got rid of Jeremy Corbyn. You know, there is still that lingering kind of feeling around Starmer, who conveniently disappeared throughout a lot of that sector of the party's history. He's apparently tidied everything up. No, he didn't. Diane Abbott is still a member of the Labour Party. Well, you know, for a bit anyway. But no, this is a real problem because
she's on and off.
On and off. It's like a badge of honour for this lot, really, at this point. But for me, Starmer knew exactly what he was doing. Let's not forget, he rather conveniently didn't tell the President of the United States what he was going to do when he was here in Scotland. And this is not a misstep. This is what they've always wanted. It's also interesting, this is actually being pushed by Jonathan Powell, who is the National Security Advisor, who was Blair's fixer.
He was his chief of staff.
Yeah, he's chief of staff, and he was the man behind also the Chagos Islands deal. So there is a lot of influence from the kind of the back rooms of the Labour Party on Keir Starmer, and that's because he is a weak Prime Minister. He's not running his own government.
And let me tell you, just before we go to a break, this is Ghazi Hamad, who's a senior member of Hamas, said at the weekend that the flurry of major nations planning to recognise a Palestinian state, including us, because of our Prime Minister and our government's stance on this, vindicated the group's terror attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023. How appalling. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to continue on that theme, really, by talking about a 22-inch rat that has been found in a house in Redcar and Cleveland, and another rat, Levi Belfeld, who is the serial killer that's being treated rather well in prison, you won't believe. But we're going to come back in 3 minutes' time and talk a bit more about that. I'm Russell Quirk, in for Ian Collins. This is Talk.
it's a massive punch down on whatever they call the working class there, or the poorer people in this country. You and I have grown up in a position in the 50s, 60s, 70s where we've seen enormous increases in our ability to travel.
It's amazing. We went on holiday to Cornwall, and that was considered far-flung when I was a kid.
Oh, well, we went to Camber Sands and Pontins, and that was a wonderful week out down on the Kent coast. It's a massive punch down on whatever they call the working class there, or the poorer people in this country. You and I have grown up in a position in the 50s, 60s, 70s where we've seen enormous increases in our ability to travel.
It's amazing. We went on holiday to Cornwall, and that was considered far-flung when I was a kid.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It's 1:23. This is Talk. I'm Russell Quirk, in for Ian Collins, just for today. I'm joined with me now by Peter Barnes, who's going to be with me for a little while. We're going to finish off some of the stories that we want to talk to him about. Let me just read you a couple of texts, because we're getting lots and lots of them in. Lots of people texting on 87222 plus the word Talk. And of course, if you want to join in on the phone, lots of people again are already calling, so please do. 0344 499 1000. I'd be delighted to take your call, whether you agree, disagree, or you've just got a point to make, even if it's not a question, even if it's not some profound statement, one way or the other. So obviously I particularly very much enjoy your calls and interaction. Without you, we would be nothing. And talking of which, texts, let me just read you a couple. Penny from Essex says, the ethnicity of the people that are accused of such crimes, whether they're migrants or not, ethnicity generally should be known immediately, and maybe that will make our loathsome PM do something. But then, of course, we would all be called racist, of course. Well, yes, going back to last summer, that's exactly what he did. Maybe it's good that he hasn't had the courage to stand outside Downing Street to make a statement about the unrest that we're seeing at migrant hotels, because, of course, yes, there'd be a further backlash, because he would no doubt resort to the same far-right type tropes that he normally does. Penny says there will be civil war for sure. Well, I sincerely hope that that does not happen, and that is not something that we would encourage one bit. Legitimate protest, peaceful, not criminal, lawful, yes. But civil war, I mean, come on, really? Do we think that? 0344 499 1000. And then Deborah says, doesn't it prove the establishment knows that these illegals cause these sorts of offences, and they therefore feel the need to cover up these crimes? Young girls have for years had these crimes covered up. Only last week it was reported that police were allegedly involved. I'm not sure, Pete, she's talking about the allegation that a police officer was involved in the rape of young girls
in
Rotherham, or whether this is the fact that, as is now a fact, I think Warwickshire police certainly have covered up the allegations relating to two Afghani migrants and their alleged crimes of a sexual nature against a 12-year-old girl up there in Warwickshire. She goes on to say a national inquiry had been agreed and yet to be implemented, and they are still covering up these appalling crimes. So yes, we should know, so that parents and carers are aware that their neighbourhoods are safe for women and children, or indeed not. And then finally, Heather Sewell says all this cover-up is just making it worse in our country. It creates more tension in our communities, in our country, and creates more problems and adds more fuel to the fire. Well, yeah, Heather's got a point. Of course, if we're not told, we all start to suspect that we're not being told for a bad reason.
Yeah. And also, politics hates a vacuum more than anything else. So when people don't have the facts or have any kind of statement from any kind of authority, then that's when, fake news and conspiracy theories get their shoes on and are halfway around the world before the truth is even out the door. And I think this is the big problem, is that because the government holds and it withholds information, it doesn't say anything, it creates this space for, these kind of mad theories and all the rest of it. But I will say, when it comes to the civil protest, I'm going to start by not saying saying anything. And that is because these protests are what we need. They're civil, they are polite, they're not kind of attacking the police, they are incredibly well policed. The one at Canary Wharf I saw...
Well, they're not, but it does seem, as we talked about yesterday on Breakfast, that it might be that the left wing of this debate, Antifa, the thugs that would go by the name of Antifa or certainly acting in their name, are turning up en masse to these protests and are causing trouble and indeed are throwing things at the police. I've seen that for myself. Let's move on to rats, though, because this is an appalling story, but one that is, I mean, wow. I mean, some might see as a bit of a comedic thing. But I guess it's not if you've encountered this problem. A 22-inch rat, as big as a cat, has been found in a UK home. Apparently, Pete, it breaks all records for vermin. Well, actually, we'll come back to that vermin word in a minute, because I'm going to talk about Levi Bellfield in a minute. But anyway, just holding that thought for a second. Tell us about this. This is a supersized rat discovered in a property in the Normanby area of Redcar and Cleveland. But it's invoked some political debate.
Yeah, it seems to kind of... So basically, this is yet again nobody taking accountability and responsibility, because the Conservatives have blamed the Labour because they've abolished the pest control aspect.
Because it's a Labour control council.
Now it's a Labour control council, but it wasn't. It was controlled by the Conservatives. And yet again, we're caught in the political to and fro of local government, which is why it is the cesspit of British politics, and it is why so much of the thing, everyday experience of politics is appalling, because the people running it have no idea what they're doing and they're behaving like this. Apparently, we're now having a vermin survey, which, I mean, those headlines just write themselves, don't they?
We should start that in Westminster, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, pick a place, and and we could start there. But this seems to be blamed on bin overflowing and fly tipping, and public spaces being left to rack and ruin.
So do we think this can be linked back to the apathy or the incompetence of a local authority not cleaning up the streets, and as a consequence there's not only rats, but it looks like they're getting rather fat?
Yes, 100%, because what this is it's letting the little things slip. It is yet again standards declining. It is yet again the need to make things better. This is scrambling. These local councils are doing all the DEI stuff and all the rest of it that they think is very important. But when people start to notice the bins overflowing, there's graffiti on the walls, there's antisocial behaviour, that is when people start to pay attention. That's when they feel that their community, their streets, their neighbourhood aren't safe. Well, that is a very dangerous place for a political party.
And all of that despite the fact that, of course, we pay more and more council tax every single year. Right, let's talk about Levi Bellfield. He is, and I'm at pains to remind you, everybody, this rat, this particular piece of vermin, the convicted serial killer, Levi Bellfield, he, and again, I regret to remind you, is convicted of the murders of Millie Dowler. That was back in 2011, I think, but in 2008, he was convicted of the murders of Marshall McDonnell and Amélie Delagrange. I think he was also convicted of an attempted murder as well. So a particularly reprehensible individual. He's now a Muslim convert, by the way. He now goes by the name of Yusuf Rahim. And I'm not suggesting for a second that is, as a consequence of that, is why he is now being given the status, believe it or not, a serial killer that has taken lives, ruined families, infinitum. A monster who, by the way, the prison that he's in, Pete, is called HMP Frankland, which is known as Monster Mansion because of the sort of people that are in it. As an enhanced prisoner, which he now is, listen to this. This is what he gets, everybody. And if this triggers you, by the way, if you are incensed by this, let me know. 0344 499 1000, or indeed text 87222 plus the word talk, or leave me a voice note 0344 499 1000 about anything we're talking about, but particularly this. Prison should be for punishing people. It should not be an easy, cosy place, should it? However, this particular individual, we did talk about this yesterday actually, there's of course the Manchester Bombers brother has enjoyed in recent weeks and months Freeview television, enhanced food and choices of entertainment, shall we say. And as I said yesterday, despite the fact that he has thrown scalding water over prison officers and tried to stab one of them to death, has his pillow fluffed every evening almost, despite that. But this is Levi Bellfield, another monster. He now gets £33 a week to spend in the canteen at that prison. Other prisoners get £19.80. The standard canteen, by the way, sells Mars bars, Coke and whatever you want, proper sweets and luxuries. He's also been given an Xbox and a fry-up. You're looking angry, Pete. You should do, because he's got not only an Xbox, while away the hours and the days, but also he enjoys, it says here, a fry-up every Saturday. That's according to the Daily Mail. A fry-up every Saturday. Why are we rewarding serial killers, not just Levi Belfield, but I suspect all of them? Is it because the prison system is so woke and so broken that actually they worry about behaviour, riots and so on? And so the prison answer, whether this is prison governors, whether this is ministers, I don't know where the authority or the decision comes from in this regard, but maybe they're so scared of behaviour issues that even if you're a serial killer, even if you're a terrorist, you're given a television, an Xbox and more money to spend on a canteen to enjoy chocolate and Coca-Cola. For goodness sake, Peter Barnes, what's happening to this world?
Well, fundamentally, the reason why this is happening is that we don't think that crime is a personal responsibility issue anymore. Crime, you're a criminal because of the environment you were brought up in. That has become
society's fault.
It's society's fault. That has become the central tenet of our justice
Can I just be
system.
clear? Peter is not saying this is his position.
No, absolutely not at all. Prisons have a punishment element, and we have forgotten that because, again, criminals are victims too. That mentality has spread like an infection throughout the legal system, and that is the big problem. Once this has kind of taken hold, everything is always kind of like, you've got to mitigate for both sides of the argument. You know what you do? You mitigate for the victims of crime, not the criminal.
And indeed, we have certain politicians in rather senior positions, our Prime Minister and Alain de Maire, that made a living previous to politics being woke defence lawyers and invoking things like the Human Rights Act and so on to assist such assailants. It's pretty disgraceful stuff, isn't it? People will be outraged and should rightly be outraged by this. The fact that, you know, I want to hear that Levi Belfield and, you know, anybody that's committed a crime, and when I say crime, I don't mean necessarily just not paying your BBC TV licence. I think we'd let you off that, actually. But anyone that's committed a crime, particularly crimes against the person, sexual violence, terrorism, serial killers, you know, I'm just saying, I want to hear that they're having a particularly hard time in prison. And look, not only should they be in prison out of harm's way, never to be released again, people like this to this extent, but we want to know, by way of those rules of natural justice, which anyone that's done anything in law will be familiar with, we want to know that justice is done and justice has been seen to be done. That is one of the central tenets of the rules of natural justice. Not, well, justice has been done, but we've given him an Xbox and an ice cream on a Thursday night and a fry-up on a Friday, or a Sunday, whenever it is. This is absolutely outrageous. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Are you spitting feathers? Are you triggered? You should be. Peter Barnes, thank you very much indeed. That was short and sweet, mate.
Yes,
normally you're here for a bit longer, but you're a busy guy.
I'm very busy today.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for winding me up and infuriating me for the rest of the day.
It's what I do best, apparently.
Yes, you do.
I'll be back after this. I'm Russell Quirk, in for Ian Collins. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk in for Ian Collins. This is Talk. It is 1:37. I'm here till 4 o'clock. Peter Cardwell after me. Let's carry on the theme of migrants and migration. Obviously, there's lots going on in that regard, particularly protests up and down the country that seem to be expanding with regard to the legitimate right for local people to protest peacefully as they are at what they feel is an increasingly broken Britain. Well, let me now talk to Henry Bolton about this, who of course is an international border control expert. It does seem, Henry, doesn't it, that this is getting worse insofar as not just the number of migrants coming to this country, but their propensity to do nasty things, allegedly. And of course we need to tread carefully, Henry, insofar as some of these cases that we're going to talk about, you and I, now being live. And the absence of government, either in terms of saying anything to calm nerves amongst the general populace, apart from, of course, Yvette Cooper's pathetic attempts at her solutions to try and solve the problems of the migrant crisis, but nothing whatsoever from Keir Starmer. And, of course, cover-ups. Now, these are very familiar, aren't they, these cover-ups by the authorities, going back decades with regard to grooming gangs, and those grooming gangs effectively being enabled, really, because the authorities said, hey, let's not disturb the populace. Let's make sure that community tensions are not provoked by way of us talking about this in ethnicity terms. And this particular cover-up that we're talking about today, Henry, is this alleged rape of a 12-year-old girl by two Afghan asylum seekers. Surely there's no reason, no excuses there for withholding either an alleged incident like this, or indeed the ethnicity of the alleged perpetrators.
No, there's not. The thing is, I think, that over, in the past, going back maybe 20, 30 years, the British population, the British public, felt that they could rely upon and trust the police and the law enforcement sort of agencies and the justice system to get on and do the job, understanding that it's a difficult job, detecting crime of all sorts, gathering the evidence, putting it before the court and getting a successful prosecution is a difficult job. I've done it. It's a difficult, long drawn out job sometimes, and sometimes extremely complex. And I think the British public understood that work was being done. And I remember when I was a police officer, there were a number of surveys done and polls done, and policing was, if not the top, it was second to brain surgeons in terms of respect for the profession. And
Henry, sorry, just to, where do we think, if there was a poll done today amongst the general population of Britain, where do we think the police would now sit in terms of credibility and respect?
Well, pretty low down. And I think that the British public doesn't necessarily blame individual police officers on the streets, but the institution of policing, if you like, and the justice system, sort of the broad brush. I don't think there is very much trust in the system at all. And it pains me to say that, because for many years I felt that the best job I had ever had, the one in which I contributed most to society, sort of more broadly, was policing. And I was very proud to have been a police officer. I'm sometimes ashamed to be a police officer, not because of what I did, but because of the way that people now perceive policing. And I think, in this case, on these sort of cases, we have a situation where the British public no longer has that trust in the system to bring people to justice and to exercise the law in a firm but fair way. Everybody should be equitable before the law, and the British public doesn't see it any longer as being so. And
it's very clear, Henry, that I don't know if you heard the segment just now, Peter Barnes and I talking about the case of Caroline Lenihan, who is a left-wing thug who has been convicted of two particular incidents, one where she attacked someone that she thought was a racist and she was wrong, but she still imposed violence on that person and incited others to round on that individual and to do them harm, it seems, but also then also attacked a police officer. it's the absolute epitome, an absolute demonstration, it seems, that given that she escaped prison for not one but two violent incidents, forgive us for thinking that because she was on the left of the political spectrum, she escaped prison when others, particularly Lucy Connolly, have not and still would not.
Well, let's sort of put aside the facts of any of these cases and just talk in terms of psychology. If people perceive, rightly or wrongly, that the police and the justice system is a two-tier system, then that is the way that people will respond. That's what they will respond to, that perception. And it is incumbent upon the police and the justice system and the government to ensure that that perception is not, it doesn't exist, that nobody has any cause to perceive that being the case. Yeah. Now, I believe, as a former police officer, that is the case.
And you hear that from your former colleagues? And because we don't hear from the rank and file police officer, and I completely accept the point that it is not the rank and file that are to blame for this. It is the chief constables and indeed the police and crime commissioners and indeed our politicians, if it is true that they are influencing police operationally in terms of dealing with one section of society differently to another. But do you hear whispers from your former colleagues that it is indeed something that they are instructed to do? Deal with that lot over there in one way, robustly, harshly, arrest them, put them through the CPS, but that lot over there that have a different political persuasion, deal with them differently. Do we have any evidence from the coalface, so to speak, that actually is the diktat, the orders that are coming down from police hierarchy down to the rank and file?
I think, Russell, it's a little bit nuanced, more nuanced than that. The police now are far more encumbered with bureaucracy, the requirements of the IT systems and so on. They have as much, really, in terms of, if not more, resources than we had back in the day. But they now have all these additional requirements, reporting requirements, sort of, non-hate crimes, whatever that is. And the process system is so much more complex that now if I could deal with 4 or 5 minor crimes, arrests, interviews and charges in one shift. Now it'll take 4 police officers sometimes to deal with one arrest in one shift. So you've got a huge amount of burden on there. That means the police have to prioritize. And then you get this, how do they prioritize? Well, that's where you get the policy imposition from chief constables, from police and crime commissioners, from the Home Office and so on. You get all the guidelines coming down. So the effect is, as you say, the effect becomes to involve politicians more in the prioritization process, which inevitably means more politicization of policing, which creates that perception. But the other thing, I mean, if just to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on that, in terms of some of the offences that we've been talking about recently, and if we go back and think about another offence back in December, there were 3 Afghans who were arrested in the UK who'd been involved in people smuggling and had been charged with rape in Belgium, and who'd come across the UK. They were arrested here. And the problem is that when we import, legally or otherwise, large numbers of people from cultures that are very different from ours, and I don't even have to judge them. They are simply different. And they have a different approach towards sex. They have a different approach towards women. They have a different approach towards children. They have, and girls. And that is the reality. And most people in...
And Henry, just to be clear, we're not making excuses for those people from those cultures. What we're saying is that that is where they come from. I mean, you would think they'd, I don't know, read a manual on how to live in Britain, and at the top of that first page it would say, you don't commit the following crimes, and so on. Let's also talk, therefore, another live case which we need to tread very carefully about, but in a similar vein, of course, is the Sudanese asylum seeker that's been living in a 3-star government hotel that apparently, allegedly, again, not been taken through the judicial system yet, so there's been no conviction, but attempted to kidnap a 10-year-old girl in front of her father before that Sudanese asylum seeker was then arrested. So we have that, and obviously we'll see what the outcome of that is in due course. I'm not sure whether that particular individual that's been charged is going to plead guilty or not guilty. But all going to be solved apparently by Yvette Cooper, Henry, of course, and her various announcements over the last couple of days. We saw last week the revelation, the solution that is not allowing anyone to come in on a boat that has more than 80 people in it. And I say that very tongue-in-cheek. Of course, I am absolutely taking the mickey. Yes, indeed. Fast-tracking the 80,000 backlog, which of course doesn't do anything for the people that are here, because guess what? They're already here. And probably if you grant an amnesty to the 80,000 asylum seekers already here, guess what? They're going to stay here. But there is going to be a £100 million border security boost and more cooperation with the French, apparently, Henry. So this is the silver bullet, isn't it?
No. No, there is no silver bullet. There's a whole range, there's a plethora of activities that need to be undertaken, proactive, law enforcement, intelligence, administrative, legal activities that must be undertaken concurrently. And governments, this government and the previous government, and for decades now, we've had one-off or maybe one or two policy announcements. This doesn't deal with it. The country needs a comprehensive and properly integrated strategic approach. We're not getting it from any political party at the moment. What the Home Secretary's announced, I'm not quite sure whether this is the same 100 million that was announced a little while ago with the Border Security Command. It may or may not be, it's a little bit unclear what money is going where. And I think it's part of the smoke and mirrors thing.
Well, I think, but Henry, did you see it was, I think, Angela Eagle, so one of the ministers within the Home Office, said today that the money is going to be thrown at France. I think we've done that before, haven't we? Where I think up to 700 million. So, but in fact, let's just see what Angela Eagle has said, just to put all of our minds at rest, Henry. Just stay there for a second.
We're also working with our French colleagues who've stopped 12,000 crossings so far this year, 12,000 people crossing, to change their stance, their maritime stance, so that they can stop boats in shallow waters. The tactics of the people smugglers change when they realise that particular rules and regulations are in effect, which is why they developed this way of having people stood in the water to clamber on boats. That is going to change soon when our French colleagues change their tactics. We have to change our tactics to adapt to the changing tactics of the people smuggling gang.
Henry, we've heard it all before, haven't we? And we're not buying it, are we?
No, not at all. There are three things I'd say about that briefly. One is Yvette Cooper met with her counterpart, the Interior Minister of France, back at the end of last year. They signed an agreement saying that France would change its approach to this. Nothing happened. Then the Prime Minister met with a couple of weeks ago with the French President Macron, and they agreed the same thing, precisely the same thing. And now we've got Dame Angela Eagle saying the same thing again. Nothing has happened. Now, I know from my French contacts that what the French are doing is saying, look, no, let's rewind slightly. We're paying the French to do things we want the French to do. The French are responding, that's not going to work. So if you want us to do these things, because we don't see them as being at all practical or functional in terms of the effect they deliver, you're going to have to pay for it. And so the Brits are saying, yes, we want you to do this, so we will pay you to do it. And of course, it's not being effective. The French are pulling their hair out over this. They get a very bad press over here, and there are some things that they can do, but they're not inclined to do it because
Henry, they might be pulling their hair out, but they are running all the way to Banque Française, aren't they, in terms of pocketing nearly £1 billion of British taxpayers' money. Henry, I think we probably need to leave it there, unfortunately. Well, no, it is. Of course, it's our fault. Of course, it's our fault. As we've said a million times on this channel, the way to stop these boats is to prevent them by way of interning people when they end up on the shores of Britain, having come over on a boat, but also just stop the incentives. We just need to stop giving the 46 quid a week. We need to stop giving out 3- and 4-star hotels with flat screen televisions. We need to stop giving out dentistry. We need to stop giving out free NHS. We need to stop giving people a reason a cause, an incentive to come to Britain. And of course, apart from the fact that as an asylum seeker, most of these individuals, of course, are not asylum seekers after all. They're freeloaders. They've got their hands out. They are simply economic migrants. And they have come all the way through Greece, Italy and France. They're supposed to apply for asylum in the first country outside of theirs that is safe that they come to. And of course, they're not. Why do they head for Britain? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are a soft touch. Henry Bolton, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take a break back after this with your calls.
Ask ourselves this question, Mike. If we were in a situation now of international hostilities and we had to take prisoners of war, we'd very soon be setting up camps. And now we've just got to take this seriously and say that all the money being spent on hotels must be rechanneled into secure camps where the community won't feel under any threat. I mean, that is the crucial thing in all of this.
Right.
People are feeling threatened and they think their children are in danger.
Because that's the thing, their children are in danger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk in for Ian Collins. I'm here till 4 o'clock. It's just coming up to 2 o'clock, and before the news I'm going to take some calls, but first I want to read you this text. I was asking Henry Bolton just now, as a former serving police officer, if he had any evidence at all that there is indeed a diktat from the hierarchy of police forces down to the rank and file, the coalface of policing, insofar as dealing with different types of protesters differently. Listen to this. Frank from Sidcup texts in to say, Russell, as a former Metropolitan Police officer, I can confirm that on a number of occasions I was stood between parties from right and left of politics at various marches and protests, and on some, but not all occasions, we were told the following. Any public order offences that happen on that side, they get arrested. The opposite side, they just get recorded as intel for exactly the same offences. And he says, this still goes on today, according to officers I know that are still in the job and are still policing the streets. Yet Keir Starmer a few months ago, stood up and told us as members of the public, concerned members of the public, worried about, a number of things without rehearsing the Southport and Summer riots issues, concerned. And he told us, he looked down the barrel of the camera and told us there is no such thing as two-tier policing, even though we've seen it with our very eyes, and indeed we continue to see it with our very eyes with regard to what's happening even at these migrant hotel protests in the last few days or so. All right, well, let's talk to Carl in Liverpool, see what he's got to say about this. Carl, thanks for calling Talk. How are you today, sir?
I'm all right, thank you, Russell. How are you?
Yeah, a bit frustrated with the, I was going to say the world, the country, really, but how about you?
Yeah, well, I listened to Julia earlier on, and she said a word, she called the Prime Minister sinister. Now, I have to really agree with it, to be honest, because although successive governments haven't tackled the immigration problem when it's so easy to do, Labour have had the 14 years, and then obviously the added period of time where they knew they were going to get in to prepare for this. And with they haven't even hesitated to even do anything about it. It's just, we've got the border force. I think he's complicit in it, Keir Starmer, a lot of them. How can you not have it? You have to have a moral compass, and if you haven't, this is what you are capable of. Because anyone with a moral compass, would stop this.
So do you think that a government and its advisors, and bearing in mind there are thousands of them at great expense, some of them might even be intelligent, you think that they could not be that incompetent to end up putting us in a position successively, actually not just Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, but successive prime ministers and home secretaries from a Conservative perspective previously. You don't think they could be that incompetent to allow this situation to develop and to continue? You think there must be a sinister, to use Julia's words, a sinister motive?
So you have to look back at the people that we've had in charge. I mean, we've
only got a minute left before the news comes.
What I'm saying is that these intelligent people, because
because we've only got a minute left, sir. What do we think the sinister motive is? I can tell you what I think it is.
Well,
I think. Go on.
I think they're purposely letting these boats come over because obviously there's the Muslim vote. We're being invaded.
I think that these people are deemed as future voters. I also think that those on the left, those that are still rehearsing sixth form politics, frankly, even though they're now in their 40s and 50s, they actually still believe that all immigration is good from an economics point of view. And I can tell you it is not. Carl in Liverpool, thank you very much indeed. You're echoing what a lot of people, I think, are saying and feeling and thinking. Yes, there has to be a sinister motive. There is. And it's, I think, one of votes. And I think it's one of naively thinking that all immigration, because our birth rate has dropped, is good for the economy. And I can tell you that is wrong, because not all immigration is the same. I'm Russell Quirk, back after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. It's 2:02. That's a nice thing to be able to say. I'm Russell Quirk. I'm in for Ian Collins just for today. There are warnings that Britain could see a repeat of the grooming gang scandal or last summer's riots if police continue to hide suspects' backgrounds after claims that 2 Afghan asylum seekers and their links to an alleged child rape in Nuneaton were covered up. Certainly the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phipp has had lots to say about that today. And also Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing yet another backlash from his own MPs after Hamas hailed his pledge to recognise a Palestinian state as one of the fruits of October the 7th. So our British Prime Minister actually being seen to reward Hamas for the atrocities of October the 7th. Who ever thought we would see such a thing? And also, Leicestershire and Rutland's Police and Crime Commissioner Rupert Matthews will be joining us on this show at 2:45 p.m. today as he is unveiled as the latest defector to Reform UK from the Conservatives. He's declared that the dark heart of wokeness must be cut out of the criminal justice system. Well, I'll be certainly talking to him about what he believes the dark heart of wokeness exactly is, and indeed how we might cut it out of the criminal justice system. You can call, as many of you have. We've taken a call already, but there are dozens and dozens. I'd like to get to all of them. I suspect we won't, but look, do keep calling. We'll take certainly those that are very much the most interesting. 0344 499 1000, or indeed text, and I'll try and read all of them out if I can. 87222 plus the word talk, or indeed you can leave a voice note message via WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. Well, look, let's go to Alan Tolhurst now, who's chief reporter at Politics Home, to talk about some of the stuff that we've been talking about today, in particular cover-ups by the police. Alan.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So what do you make of this this story that's now been brewing for the last couple of days, that it seems that Warwickshire police did indeed provide diktats to councillors and others in authority up in Warwickshire not to say anything about the fact that 2 Afghan asylum seekers were alleged, and again we have to tread carefully here, have been alleged to have committed A, rape, and B, in the second count, the second instance, a charge of conspiracy to rape. So again, to make it clear, they've been charged, not found guilty, they've not been convicted. However, it does seem that the police sought to cover this up, and it's the same old line from our so-called authorities, Alan, which is that of trying to ensure that we don't incite some kind of community tension. That's what happened that facilitated 20 or 30 years ago the emergence and continuation of the grooming gangs, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if you can directly link those two things necessarily, but I certainly think you're right.
The same motive, the same diktat has led exactly to both of these things that we're talking about today. I mean, inarguably, if we hadn't had a situation where Labour councillors predominantly and the police and other members of the authorities, particularly in the likes of Rochdale and elsewhere, if they weren't covering these things up, then those things, perhaps those people would have been brought to justice quicker and fewer people would have been raped. I think it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, although I do think, having seen what's happened with terms of arrests or investigations into police officers and their kind of culpability in those scandals, I think part of the reason why those terrible kind of gangs and stuff weren't uncovered earlier was because simply that the police weren't bothered about it. It wasn't simply that they could cover it up, they just simply were not acting, in some cases were colluding with those people involved. But I think in this instance, it's a classic example, I think, what we've seen a lot recently, that just the way that the police and their communications, their kind of systems for it are just really poor, because every time they try and say they're doing something to not provide information, to prevent something from happening, all that does is create a vacuum into which people put their own ideas anyway. And the fact is that if these things are not mentioned, then people have an inkling as to what it is that they're trying to sort of not tell us, essentially, and that causes the same problems that they're trying to prevent. And I think we've seen this not just around the kind of grooming gang stuff, we've seen it around other high-profile cases where the police, their kind of policy of not giving out this information until the very last moment creates more problems than it tries to solve.
And Alan, we saw, didn't we, in the summer, that as a consequence of the public perceiving that things were being withheld with regard to the Southport murders, we saw that there was, as a consequence, that fuelled unrest. Keir Starmer certainly didn't assist that situation. It turns out, obviously, that the Labour government knew exactly who Axel Rudabakana was, and indeed knew that he had, it seems, had ricin hidden under his bed and an Al-Qaeda manual. But despite that, of course, they allowed speculation to run and run and run, and indeed, some would argue, fibbed about the fact that this was a choir boy from Wales. Why is it then that the authorities 12 months on have not learnt those lessons and continue seemingly to cover up not only the ethnicity of these alleged assailants, but the very crimes themselves? What do they think they're achieving? Because this is going to, as Chris Phipp, the Shadow Home Secretary, has been saying this morning, this is going to trigger further unrest.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I think West Midlands Police are going to have to answer. They say they're hiding behind the fact is that the national policy on this stuff is to not to release the ethnicity and other data or other kind of information about people when they're charged and potentially until later on. But that just doesn't wash. As we've seen last year, we've seen in lots of other cases that we've been talking about, that just simply creates kind of further problems, essentially. And you talked about the information on Axel Rudabakana. All sorts of kind of spurious information was being put out there online because the official story was not being fleshed out properly, and that will continue to happen, and it will continue to lead people to think, what are people hiding if they're not telling us these things? And that
But Alan, when it's a white person, Alan, sorry, I'm losing you a little bit, but I'm going to try and persevere. Hopefully you can hear me okay, but we're losing you a little bit. But when it's a white person, it seems that they do reveal the ethnicity of that individual immediately, don't they? Alan, I think we may have lost you, I'm afraid. OK, well, look, I'm going to ramble on about this because I'm incensed by it. Let me know what you think of this. Do you think there is ever a reason, an excuse for the police or any other authority, frankly, to withhold the crimes that are suspected as having been committed by migrants, by asylum seekers? Do you think it's ever OK for the ethnicity of those individuals to be withheld, to be covered up? I mean, I would strongly suggest that if there is a pattern emerging by way of the fact that there's a propensity, there's a likelihood, if you like, a greater propensity, a greater likelihood of some to commit crimes, particularly of a violent or a sexual nature, where they do come from particular nations, then surely rather than covering it up, we should know, because we have a right to know as taxpayers and as voters, as a democracy, we have a right to know that. But also then if it's transparent and it's debated, then surely we can try and seek to do something about it rather than literally sweeping it under the carpet. Well, look, while we try and get Alan back, let's speak to a caller, Kevin in Portsmouth, about migrants. Kevin, thanks for calling Talk.
Good, what are we? Good afternoon?
It's definitely afternoon. What time did you get up, Kevin?
Not that early, but time flies when you're having fun. Right now, I was actually calling you more about the Gilets Jaunes. Actually, I was talking to the Calvados Police Nationale chief in Caen a few years ago, and was saying that the Gilets Jaunes, like the demonstrators outside the various migrant hotels and blocks of flats and everything else, were peaceful.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, you're right. They've gone to a roundabout, gun the place up for a couple of hours, send a copper down saying, come on, guys, you've had your fun, move on. They've gone to the next roundabout and do it all over again. The country was behind them. Now, one of the reasons this happened was the price of road fuel in France started out 20% less than the UK and is now 20% more than the UK. Now, that is a hell of a jump.
Well, through taxation?
Just the cost of it at the pumps. How it got there, I have no idea.
It must be taxation because oil price is oil price. So yeah, I presume it's greater taxation now in France. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that comes out of taxed income. You're in rural France. You've got to travel to work maybe quite a long way, and that really jacks up the cost of everything. Now, a friend of mine posted his shopping list, and he went into a local supermarket, and a weekly shop cost him something like €280.
So Kevin, forgive me, how does this relate to migrants rather than the cost of living in Paris?
Yeah, no. Well, it was in Caen. But no, how it relates to the migrants was the Gilets jaunes were completely peaceful. This is the reason why they're demonstrating. This is the reason why the country was pretty much behind them.
But the French do protest about everything, don't they?
They do, but it's very rare that you get the whole country saying, "Yeah, we need to do something about this."
And are you saying that the French authorities gave in because of the weight of those protests?
No, they gave in because of COVID. Because COVID came along and that knocked it on the head. But the point the guy was making was, he said, look, for 3 weeks, these guys were absolutely fine, moved them on. Everybody's quite friendly because the cops are fairly sympathetic too because their prices had gone up by the same amount. He said until the anarchists turned up.
Yeah, indeed. Kevin, look, we're going to have to leave it there because my friend Alan Tolhurst is back. Kevin in Portsmouth, thank you very much indeed. Good point at the end there, until the anarchists turned up, of course. Alan, are you back?
I am indeed, yes. Sorry about that, Russell.
That's okay. Where were we, sir? We were talking about... I don't know what we were talking about. Well, let's move on anyway, because I've got 2 or 3 other things to talk to you about.
Sure.
What do you make of the defection? We will be talking in half an hour's time to Rupert Matthews, who is the latest defector from the Conservative Party to Reform. He is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because it kind of plays into kind of a narrative at the moment, which is a lot of people on the right of politics are making that jump over from the Conservatives to Reform. And I think you saw with someone like Jake Berry, the former MP, the former vice chairman of the Conservative Party. And I think it's not about the individuals themselves, necessarily what they represent or how high profile they are. It's the kind of the movement, the kind of the momentum on the right of British politics is all with Reform, that people look to the future. They look to their potential re-election in whatever level of politics that might be, and see that Reform are the way of making that so. And I think we're going to continue to see that. Ambitious politicians, perhaps people who've been in politics before and want to get back into it, will look to Reform, I think, ahead of the Conservatives. And that, I think, is what's should worry the Conservatives, really, because they've lost a huge amount of councillors. They lost something like 3,000 councillors in the last 3 local elections. So all the kind of ground staff are all gone, essentially. And if people are then leaving to move into Reform, it's going to be much harder for them to kind of claw back their electoral position.
Well, and Alan, this isn't a bad scalp for Reform, isn't it? A police and crime commissioner. I mean, I would say that's one rung down from an MP. I don't know if you'd agree with that analysis. When are we going to start seeing some... And we've seen Jake Berry, who's a former Conservative MP. He has defected, so he's resigned his membership of the Conservative Party. He's now a Reform member very publicly from 2 or 3 weeks ago. When do we start to see serving Conservative MPs defecting? Do you think they'll still wait and see how the wind vane is, which direction it is pointing in over the next year or two in terms of where they're likely to win their seat as a Conservative, or whether they need to jump ship? And I'm not suggesting that MPs are selfish and only think about themselves in terms of preserving their political seat, but do you think that sometime soon we will start seeing defections of Conservative MPs to Reform?
Well, there was a lot of speculation around Suella Braverman. We know that her husband had joined Reform, and there was talk of her joining him and becoming a Reform member. But then it seems like they fell out with Zaya Youssef, and Suella Braverman's husband fell out, and it seems like that's less likely to happen at the moment, certainly while Zaya Youssef is still involved with Reform. So I think that one kind of knocked that one on the head. In terms of other MPs, I think that they definitely want to see the direction of travel. I think we know that how big next year's elections are in May. Obviously, there's not just kind of the local elections, there's also elections in Wales and in Scotland. And
unless they're cancelled, Alan, can I just make the point? So where I live in Essex, the ruling administrations decided to cancel the elections. They say it's because of devolution. I think this also happened in some parts of Kent and elsewhere, but certainly the county elections were cancelled. And a cynic, which I can often be, by the way, may suggest that was because of the rise of Reform. The Conservative and even the Liberal Democrats and certainly Labour were very, very frightened indeed with regard to holding elections this May, because, well, Essex County Council would have been wiped out. It would have gone from dark blue to turquoise. I mean, do we think that could happen again in May 2026? I mean, because that's anti-democratic.
No, I think that's not going to happen simply because the part of the reason was that there are reforms coming into the way that local authorities are run by the Labour government, and those reforms, essentially changing it so that everywhere, instead of having these authorities where there's two or three tiers, you have a town, a district, and a county council, kind of moving all of them to become unitary authorities where there's just one council. That essentially will happen before we get to the next set of elections. So therefore, there'll be no reason to delay elections further. But I do think that point next year, May 2026, will be a big kind of inflection point for those in the Conservative Party who might want to perhaps get rid of someone like Kemi Badenoch and bring in, if they did do that and brought in someone like Robert Jenrick, perhaps some of those people who've been looking to move to reform might be tempted to stay on if they do think that the party is still going in the wrong direction after that point. And we could see some further defections then.
There will also be mayoral elections, directly elected mayors in some parts of the country, including Essex, by the way. So that will be very interesting indeed to see how.
Yeah, and we know Reform will target those definitely. Obviously, they targeted them in Lincolnshire, where they won a couple of months ago, and I think we'll definitely see them target those places where they can get those kind of big, high-profile, directly elected figures. I think we'll definitely see Reform going for a lot of those as well.
And finally, just the last thing I want to touch on with you is private schools. And I must declare an interest here. I went to private school, believe it or not. I know I seem like an unpolished former Essex or current Essex former estate agent, but I did go to private school, but only till the age of 11. One of my 3 daughters goes to private school, so I'll declare a little interest here. But 50 private schools, Alan, have shut in the last 12 months since Labour. In fact, it's less than that. So since Labour actually put up VAT on fees, which is the beginning of this year, 50 private schools, some of them 200, 300, 400 years old, have shut. You would imagine that Labour would not want to be seen as a party that wants to diminish education in Britain. But it seems that because, I guess you could call it the politics of envy, the green-eyed monster of, again, student politics and Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer and others, and the fact that they haven't snapped out of that political ideology from when they were back at school, that displaces about 30,000 children educationally. They should be ashamed of themselves, shouldn't they?
Well, I will just sound a note of caution there. I'll also declare an interest. I did go to private school, but my thoughts on this are actually that if you look at the figures, at least 50 private schools do close their doors every year for various reasons. And actually, if you look at the number of private schools that exist, that number has actually gone up in the last year.
So you're saying that the imposition of 20% extra on the school fees of each child in those private schools across Britain has made no difference at all?
Oh, no, not at all. I'm not saying that, but I think the kind of headline figure, I think you have to understand in the context of the education system more broadly. There are clearly schools where the leaders of those schools have said, we are closing because of this. But that number 50 refers to not just schools that have closed, but also schools that intend to close in the future. So I don't think it's quite as sort of catastrophic for the whole industry.
Let me answer it this way. Do you think it's right to tax education?
Well, that's a question for the politicians, not for the journalists, I'm afraid.
I'm interested in your view.
Well, look, as someone who's been to private school, it is interesting. I think that it was always seen as a strange one that private schools that made a kind of profit were seen as like charities again, Alan, and got a tax break.
Ideology. Well, it's not a tax break, is it? I mean, it's just the fact that VAT was not applied previously to school fees, like it's not applied to, I don't know.
Well, many,
children's clothes, right? Are we saying that parents get a tax break because little jeans and little tiny trainers for 3-year-olds are not taxed? I mean, look, I don't buy that at all. And of course, the fact remains that the amount of money that Rachel Reeves thought that she was going to see as a consequence of this policy, it's not, in terms of tax take, going to be anything like she thought it was. No. So it's an absolute economic shooting in the foot, as we've come to expect from Labour, frankly. Alan Tolhurst, thank you very much indeed. Sorry we lost you for a bit, but you came back with, with a vengeance. That's Alan Tolhurst there from, Political Home. So, Politics Home, sorry. Right, we're going to take a break. Back with your calls and texts after this. I'm Russell Quirk, in for Ian Collins. This is Talk.
ask ourselves this question, Mike. If we were in a situation now of international hostilities and we had to take prisoners of war, we'd very soon be setting up camps. And, you know, now we've just got to take this seriously and say that all the money being spent on hotels must be rechanneled into secure camps where the community won't feel under any threat. I mean, that is the crucial thing in all of this.
Right.
People are feeling threatened and they think their children are in danger.
Because that's the thing, their children are in danger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk in for Ian Collins. It's just come out to 25 minutes past 2 o'clock. Just to remind you, in about 20 minutes' time, it'll be the first broadcast interview that Rupert Matthews has held since the announcement this morning by Nigel Farage that Rupert has defected from the Conservatives to Reform as the Leicestershire Police and Crime Commissioner. So stay tuned for that in 20 minutes' time. That's at 2:45. But meantime, we're going to take your calls to take us up to the next break. Let's speak to Anne in Sussex. Anne, what did you want to say?
Oh, hello, Russell. It was the subject earlier about the state of our towns and cities and council tax, etc. I've been a councillor for 40 years, and what I find now is that many of the newer councillors, you don't know who they are. You can't contact them. You have to go through the local council offices to find or to register any complaints. And I find that dreadful because when you are a councillor and your residents contact you about an issue, you have to respond. You've got their voice behind you to make a difference and make things happen. And when I look at the state of our towns, cities and villages now, all wild and overgrown and neglected, and you think, I'm not surprised it's happening because now, especially with our larger authorities, many councillors make it a career choice, a source of income, more than way back when I first stood and people said, I want to make a difference. I want to give something back.
So are you saying that, I mean, first of all, there's two questions, I guess, further to that kind of revelation, really. First of all, you're suggesting that phone numbers and email addresses of councillors are masked almost with regard to residents, therefore not being able to easily contact them. That's my first question. And then the second one would be, are you suggesting that the state of our streets in terms of overflowing bins, litter, abandoned cars and so on, and maybe 22-inch rats, as we reported on earlier up in Redcar, might be as a consequence of not being able to get hold of your councillor to report and complain about such things?
I would say yes, because as councillors, I mean, I only know over the years, I would not always see where the rubbish was collecting or the bins when you cover a large area, but I certainly got phone calls, and then I'd see for myself when I get in touch with the officers. But also I'd find ways to change things. Yes, this is an issue for people, whether it's clearing up dog mess on the streets or making playgrounds safer or getting the trees cut back when people are blind or disabled and bushes are all over the pavement. There were so many areas that needed looking at. And some councillors don't even live in the area that they're elected now.
So do you think that some of these councillors see being a councillor as a political stepping stone? Because I definitely know some of those who have climbed up the greasy pole, and I'm not saying they don't care about their area or their constituents, their residents as such, but I've certainly seen, when I was a councillor in Brentwood and Essex for 8 years, there were definitely characters that you could see were there for their political opportunism rather than being concerned about overflowing bins. Do you think that's becoming more pronounced, more exaggerated now, Anne?
I certainly would agree with you, and you put it better than I could. That is exactly what happens. And also, that is the reason that we have people in government who are inept. They haven't had the day-to-day issues of dealing what really matters to people. And the other thing that, the other strand, if I may, Russell, is you were talking about education and what is happening.
And not taxing it was my point.
We're not taxing it, but, you know, if you want to get rid of the schools and you want to get rid of the private schools, and I certainly didn't go to a good school, what happens is you actually dumb down your population, which is what they have done.
But it makes the left feel better about themselves, apparently, Anne.
Well, isn't that nice for them? You know, when we had the Bessie Braddocks and Manny Shinwell, we had people who you would say were left, but they were dedicated people and they knew what they were about. Now we've got what you call champagne socialists, people who are worried about the poor, but my goodness, they're the ones who would walk by the homeless or cross the road. I'd begged for help from colleagues of mine for people who were violent and homeless. That's not what they wanted to know.
Well, it's the liberal elite, I'm afraid, isn't it? And the supposition that actually those, particularly on the left, that are part of the liberal elite don't really care about Britain or people at all. They care about, again, that greasy political pole. Anne in Sussex, what a brilliant call. Thank you very much indeed. A revelation there that there are some parts of Britain where you just won't be able to get hold of your councillor, yet still we are faced with this devolution thing where it seems like certain counties, instead of having multiple district and borough councils, are going to have far, far fewer of them by way of this move towards unitaries. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Let's speak to Chris in Derby about prisons. Chris, welcome to Talk. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Russell. How are you doing?
Good, good. You want to talk about prisons? Are you talking from experience, sir?
Yes.
Okay, tell me.
I can't figure out how this guy gets his Xbox and his guy and his Sky and stuff like that.
He's an enhanced prisoner, Chris. What does that mean?
I believe that somebody is giving him money from somewhere. You're only allowed a certain amount in your canteen.
So, Chris, sorry, were you in prison?
Yes.
Okay. So is enhanced prisoner not a term that you're familiar with? Is it a new thing? I mean, since you were released, perhaps?
No, it's...
perhaps it's reserved only for serial killers.
I don't believe it matters whether you're a serial killer or a terrorist or whatever. It's an enhanced person, that they're either A or B or C. The enhanced is an E and has nothing to do with your category of prisoner. The category
but I guess, can I just venture, Chris? I mean, regardless of the label, this Levi Belfeld monster, and he's a monster, convicted of multiple murders, he's in prison for life, thankfully, converted to Islam, but maybe that's not relevant, but he gets almost twice as much as a standard prisoner to spend in the canteen on... lemonade, Coca-Cola, ice cream, Mars bars and whatever, but also has a television and access to an Xbox. That doesn't sound very punishing. I mean, as an ex-inmate, do you think he should be punished more than it clearly seems he is?
It's not a punishment, but in order to get an Xbox, you have to buy it from the canteen. You have to buy it. You have to have the money in your wallet.
Yeah, but he shouldn't be allowed to buy an Xbox. Chris.
Well, somebody's giving him money to be able to do that.
No, I understand that. I understand that you can somehow get money given to you in prison, which also seems very odd and counter to justice, frankly.
But all of the electrical items are provided by Argos.
I mean, sorry, hang on. What else can you have? A Peloton, for goodness sake?
If you've got enough money.
Sorry, are you bloody kidding me?
No, I'm not. No. No,
hang on, are you serious? Is this not April the 1st, as it goes? Are you telling me that if you've got enough money in your prison digital wallet, you can buy whatever you want? So you could have a microwave, you could have, I don't know, a stair lift to help you up the prison steps? I mean, whatever else.
I had to steal a kettle and a very small television. When I first went in, I just had tea bag pushed under my door from different inmates, and I had to make tea with the warm water that came out of the tap.
Okay,
because
I
they
mean,
didn't have a kettle.
that might be a bit extreme. I don't think anyone would begrudge you a kettle or your basic human rights, which you should have in prison. But I think an Xbox and a Peloton, and I know I'm kind of saying that slightly tongue-in-cheek, but might be a bridge too far when it comes to being the definition of people being in prison for punishment. I mean, it sounds like these prisoners are better off inside than they are outside. Chris, wow. OK, look, I've got to go to a break. I'm flabbergasted. Are you? 0344 499 1000. Text me if you think that's fine. So if you're on an Xbox, maybe, I don't know, a 60-inch television with a full Sky Sports package, 0344 499 1000, if you think that is OK. Chris from Derby, thank you very much indeed for your call. I wasn't taking the mickey out of you. I'm just absolutely aghast that if you've got some money, inverted commas, that you can basically have whatever electrical appliance in prison you like. What is the prison system, the justice system coming to? 0344 499 1000. I'm Russell Quirk, in for Ian Collins, just gone at 2:30. I'll be back after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It is 25 to 3. I'm here till 4 o'clock. In for Ian Collins. I'm Russell Quirk. It's been quite a show, I think. Lots going on, fast moving, lots of debate, lots of calls, and revelations about the prison system. Basically, if you've got enough money, you can have whatever you want. Don't worry about restitution as such in terms of justice. But yes, some people's cells, I presume, in various prisons across the country, yes, look like an Argos catalogue. It seems quite unbelievable. Let's now speak about trans ideology. Yes, why not? Fiona McAnina, who's Director of Campaigns for Sex Matters, joins me now. We're going to keep on the subject of prison and prison officers, Fiona, if you don't mind. How are you?
Hello there, Russell.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. A prison officer, apparently, has been sacked after refusing to call a male-born trans woman, inverted commas, she. What do you make of that?
Well, it's probably no accident this has happened in Scotland, or no coincidence, where people seem truly to believe that men can become women and that it's so deeply offensive it borders on criminal not to play along with it. I think being a prison officer is probably pretty tough. The idea that they also have to manage their pronouns and, you know, ignore the evidence of their own eyes is really quite extraordinary. And I think it's a real worry that the prison service has got itself into this kind of a muddle where it's putting the feelings of men who identify as women ahead of actual discipline and safety, and having a decent officer, prison officer, unable to work in the service because he won't do the right thing with pronouns.
You would think that Scotland would have learned from the downfall of Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, that's effectively what boxed her into a political corner, isn't it, a couple of years back? Let's just expand on this story then, if I may, Fiona, for a second. This is, and by the way, he's an army veteran, right? This is David Toshak, who has served his country, has now decided to go through the prison officer training process, but was dismissed by GeoAmey, which is one of the UK's largest security firms, so I presume are contracted to the prison service, during a training course just days before he was due to actually take up a role as a prison custody officer, as you say, in Scotland, actually in Fife. The father of three said he told a safeguarding workshop as part of that training that he would not be comfortable using a transgender inmate's preferred gender pronouns, and said that he had gender critical beliefs. Well, I would say they're not gender critical, they're just normal, that men are men and women are women, chromosomes and all that. And as a consequence of saying that he doesn't believe that people are able to change their sex, their biological sex, guess what, he's right, you can't. He was fired. I mean, he'll surely have a case to answer, but this is not a brilliant testimony, is it, to society? I thought we were getting rid of woke. Clearly not.
There seems to be so many policies and so many erroneous beliefs about the law that are deeply embedded in our institutions that even when, you know, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, has said men are men, women are women, you know, you can't change sex, we still have this kind of situation coming up. And I think it will take quite a lot of effort for these kind of erroneous understandings to be pulled out of organisations like GeoAmey, indeed the Scottish Prison Service that GeoAmey presumably worked to. You know, they're all centred on the needs and feelings of people who claim to have changed sex. And so the common sense approach, which is legally protected in law, it is that fight we have won legally, that just gets pushed aside. Whether this man will pursue legal action, I don't know. There are time limits on doing it, and he may be timed out, but he shouldn't have to. You know, it should be completely reasonable to go to work and say, I will do the job, I will do the right thing for these prisoners, these people in my care. But I don't have to pretend that a man is now a woman.
Well, and this, of course, you know, if anyone was morally or intellectually unsure of the reality between what is a man and a woman, and the shape-shifting, if you like, from a trans perspective between, you know, being a man and being a woman, identifying as whatever you want. I mean, the Supreme Court, as you say, has been decisive. Why is it that these authorities, these organisations in Britain, and this isn't the only one, of course, the Scottish prison system, why is it that they still remain, I mean, I was going to say unsure, but almost antagonistic towards that ruling? I mean, surely they shouldn't be allowed to have such a view, and certainly shouldn't be allowed to fire David Toshak on the grounds that not only is he morally and correct from a common sense point of view, but he also has the Supreme Court on his side.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they are defiant. And we've seen this right across the country in organisations, in universities, even in government departments, and even from MPs. We're hearing this kind of suggestion that somehow the Supreme Court ruling isn't clear, or it perhaps doesn't apply, or perhaps it shouldn't apply. It's very disappointing. And I agree with you, it shouldn't be the case. We need much stronger leadership, because the law is perfectly clear. This is not a new law. This is the Supreme Court clarifying what the law has always been since the Equality Act of 2010 was enacted. And really, we should be over this now. And indeed, yes, this man shouldn't be fired, but he shouldn't have to fight to get his job back. Indeed, another travesty. I've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. I've got to move on to the next subject. But Fiona, lots and lots I could talk to you about all day, I can assure you. Fiona McAnena there, Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. I'm delighted to say that we now have an interview that we've been trailing for the last half an hour or so, which is Rupert Matthews, who has made the decision today, as announced by Nigel Farage at a Reform event today, to defect as Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire from the Conservatives to Reform. And I'm delighted to say that he joins me now on Talk as an exclusive, his first broadcast interview, I believe. Rupert, thank you very much indeed for joining me, sir.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Good to see you. And I guess my first question has to be why? Why have you defected from the Tories to Reform?
OK, I've been thinking about this for some time, I think it's fair to say. I think that Reform are very likely to follow a more robust line on law and order. Certainly they're going to be able to support me in some of the work I'm doing, trying to get the police to do more in the way of prevention rather than reactive policing, and also to fight against the woke side of policing that so often comes out of the National Police Chiefs Council.
And Rupert, do you mind me asking, because
we've
been talking about it all morning here in terms of the evidence that suggests that two-tier policing is very much alive and well in Britain. Is that injustice, if you like, is that one of the reasons that you defected from the Conservative reform, so that you can fight against such things if there were particularly to be a government, a reform government?
I've been struggling against it ever since I got elected about 4 years ago. So I wouldn't have said that was a key feature, but yes, absolutely. I think reform is going to be a lot more robust in supporting myself and others who are trying to make sure that policing is a lot more impartial, a lot more neutral than perhaps it has been over the past few years. And I'm very happy to be here and get the support that I need.
Okay. Do you think the Conservative Party is finished?
No, I don't think so. The Conservative Party has been around for a long time. I think it's probably finished as a party of government, but you look at the Liberals, they had a catastrophic decline in the first part of the 20th century, but they've bumped along quite nicely. 5 MPs here, 20 MPs there, some local councillors. So that, I'd imagine that's sort of where the Conservative Party is going.
Yeah. Rupert, I've got to ask you, though, that there's been another defection called Vanessa Frake, who's a former prison governor who apparently oversaw the detention of Rose West and Myra Hindley. She's joined Reform. Yeah. She's previously criticised the Conservatives, arguing that the prison service is now on its knees and so on. But she's also said in an interview to mark her appointment as an advisor that she says trans women should not automatically be barred from women's prisons. I have to say, how does Reform square that particular circle?
Well, I'm not the
Do you agree with her?
Reform spokesman. I can speak for myself.
But do you agree with her?
Well, when you're dealing with something like prison, you're really looking at how you manage the problem, how you manage risk and so on. So I'd have thought something like that. The presumption has got to be that trans women are not winning, as we've seen in the recent court case.
And that as men, they should be in men's prisons. Rupert, I'm ever so sorry to cut you off. I really, really am. You'll understand why shortly. But we just got to go to a break.
It's a massive punch down on whatever they call the working class there, or the poorer people in this country. You and I have grown up in a position in the 50s, 60s, 70s where we've seen enormous increases in our ability to travel.
It's amazing. We went on holiday to Cornwall, and that was considered far-flung when I was a kid.
Oh, well, we went to Camber Sands and Pontins. That was a wonderful week out down on the Kent coast. It's a massive punch down on whatever they call the working class there, or the poorer people in this country. You and I have grown up in a position in the 50s, 60s, 70s where we've seen enormous increases in our ability to travel.
It's amazing. We went on holiday to Cornwall, and that was considered far-flung when I was a kid.
Oh, well, we went to Camber Sands and Pontins. That was a wonderful week out down on the Kent coast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, sorry to cut that last interview somewhat short, but I have some breaking news, and that is this. With great regret, we bring you the heartbreaking news that our very own James Whale has passed after his terminal cancer battle. He was 74 years old. James Whale began his career way back in 1975 when he pioneered the late-night phone-in. In his time, he hosted numerous shows for ITV, the BBC, finally ending up with us here at Talk Radio in 2016. Talk's Mike Graham brings you this, a moving tribute to the broadcasting legend that was James Whale.
Broadcaster James Whale, MBE, has died, aged 74. James began his remarkable career in the early 1970s when he pioneered a new kind of radio in Britain, the late-night shock jock phone-in. By the late 1980s, the James Whale radio show had become a cultural phenomenon, broadcasting every weekend on ITV. He attracted millions of viewers, making him a household name.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the Saw Doctors!
James would go on to host a variety of programmes for ITV, Sky and the BBC before finding a new audience with Talk Radio, all the while continuing to make headlines during his appearance on Celebrity Big Brother. In 2006, after surviving kidney cancer, James launched Kidney Cancer UK, raising hundreds of thousands of pounds.
The problems with all cancers is nobody bothers to get checked. And if you get checked early, then you will actually have a much better outcome. But people don't do that.
In 2024, James was awarded an MBE in the New Year Honours, recognising his extraordinary contribution to broadcast and charity.
If I have a few more months, that will be great. If I have until next Christmas or this coming Christmas, will be nice, wouldn't it? But if I die tomorrow, I've had an amazing time and I married an amazing lady.
James Whale broke the rules, he shaped the airwaves and did it all on his own terms. For millions, James wasn't just a broadcaster. He was a companion, a provocateur and a good friend that we'll all never forget. God bless you, James. We'll miss you.
And before James passed, he recorded this, his final goodbye.
I'm in the hospice, and I probably won't be here next week, but I'm fine. I've got so many drugs in me, I can't feel a thing. What I wanted to say really was, a lot of people get very upset when someone is going to die. I'm the person who's going to die, and I'm quite relaxed about it, aren't I?
You have come to terms with it brilliantly.
You find it more difficult?
I do find it quite difficult, and the hardest bit is when people are sending you such lovely messages, some voice notes and little messages saying how important you've been in their lives and everything, and it's just thank you for those messages. It's really quite moving.
Well, we end up crying quite a lot.
They make us cry, but in a good way.
Yeah, I have no pain from this voice. It just won't work.
And it's such a shame for you, because obviously your voice is your thing.
Yeah, but the sun is shining. And I'm kind of going through my life, if you like. And I'm very upset and worried about Nadine.
about me. We've been having some lovely time reminiscing about all the lovely things we've done, haven't we?
We've had a good time together, haven't we?
The best.
I love you.
I love you too. Shall we sign off on the podcast now?
Thank you for being a listener. I hope it helps in some way. And who knows what's next. So I can only say au revoir.
Yes, that's very good. Au revoir, not goodbye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Okay, so this might just be the hardest thing that I've ever done. Yeah, so the news is James Whale has passed away at the age of 74 after his terminal cancer battle. I don't really want to be one of these people that says, oh yes, well, I knew James, and, you know, to make it all about me. There'll be a lot of that, I suspect, in terms of, you know, pictures of people with James and so on. But I do have my own little story, which is when I got into this particular business some years ago, it was with him, James Whale. I asked to go and do paper reviews on a certain other station that might begin with B and end in C. And lo and behold, my first paper review ever was on that particular channel, on The Breakfast Show. Guess who the host was? It was James Whale. And I was very, very worried indeed, I can tell you, because James, of course, comes with a certain reputation. That reputation is one of being rather bold, rather outspoken, and rather formidable. But I have to tell you that from my first encounter with James, and I did a number of paper reviews with him on that channel, he was nothing but delightful to me. I'd go as far as to say that he almost put his kind of metaphoric arm around me. And then, coincidence of coincidences, I then get a call many, many years ago from producers here at Talk when we were in another place up the road. And it was a producer on behalf of James. James had come over to Talk and asked me to appear on his show, which I duly did. I was delighted to do. So I rocked up face to face and was kind of reunited with the legend. And I know we use that word a lot on this station, but no one's going to argue with me with regard to that word being used, I can tell you that. So reunited with James I was, and then again, roll forward a few months, in fact it might have been a year or two, and me with my sharp elbows trying to persuade the producers here at Talk that I should have a shot at doing this very thing that I'm doing now, which is to present a show. And I get a call from Chuck Thomas, who is one of the producers here, executive producers, who asked me to fill in for James Whale as his understudy, if you like, on a show that he was unable to do because he was ill. So I have to say, it's my great privilege to have done that. And I'm not sure if it's a privilege or not, but yes, having to do this is not easy at all. I can tell you that. Right, what we're doing now, guys, because this is obviously a bit of a curveball. There's yeah, early this month, I guess. Sorry, they've just put this in front of me. Sorry, I had to do my little bit there because he was instrumental in assisting me in my so-called career here. It's I don't know, what's the word? Rather an unfortunate coincidence that I'm here announcing his passing. James gave his final interview amid his cancer battle. In his most compelling interview to date, an emotional James sat down with Reform UK leader and longtime friend Nigel Farage at his home in Kent as he looked back on his legendary broadcasting career and the world of politics. Here it is.
Thanks, Nigel.
James, you're a complete star.
I hope I've got more than a few weeks, but...
Well, so do I.
That's really made me...
So do
good.
I. And you never know, miracles do happen.
They do. They do.
They do happen. Well, your career's been a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it has, considering I had no A-levels, O-levels, CSEs, or even a letter after my name for broadcasting.
You said to me the other day, you've never really had a job.
I haven't.
Well, a man that knew James Whale more than most, my colleague, my friend Jeremy Kyle, joins us now. Jez, what can we say?
Don't know, mate. Really, it's really difficult to put into words the impact that the legend that was James Whale had on so many people. You can talk about The job he did. I just heard your personal tribute. The only reason I got into this craziness was him. He was an absolute fearless legend, a man who believed that it was about people, believed it was about opinion, never shied away from being brave enough to say what he felt. That resonated with me early doors. And listen, I just got a call from Den, and it's so heartbreaking. It's one of those things where you believed it was coming. We were really lucky.
Well,
Mike and I.
He trailed it, Jez, hadn't he, in fairness? So everybody knew it was coming, but that's
the measure of the man, that he was able to talk because he knew that would benefit perhaps other people who wouldn't perhaps think to do something. I just was going to say I'm so pleased. I just spoke to Denny. We both had listen. We were lucky enough last week with MG to go down to see James in the hospice before really anybody knew he was in the hospice, and it was an amazing afternoon. And I know when somebody passes, it's tragic, but he was so funny. Just
and
James I know.
And Jez, we've got to pay tribute to this man, not just as the man, but I'm not sure the likes of Talk would exist without him being the pioneer of talk radio and talk TV back in the 80s and 90s. You know, I still remember his approach, his attitude, if you like, when he was on late night television back in the 80s, you know. And of course he's been fired from a lot of places. Now I hope it's not inappropriate to say that, and the Dean won't mind me saying, but I think that pioneering attitude, that approach, those sharp elbows will define that man as the pioneer of talk TV and radio, don't you think?
I think that there's nothing more poignant that his career ended up on a station called Talk, because you're absolutely right. Not only was he synonymous with Talk Radio, to me, he was the founder of Talk Radio. The only reason I got into it, as I said, was because there was this just inimitably, he's just so brave in his broadcasting, and people, whether they agreed with him or they disagreed with him, and they might spend their whole life disagreeing with everything or agreeing, but they appreciated the fact that he said
mate,
what he felt.
you know how this works. It all stops with the news. We've got to go to the news, I'm afraid, mate. Let me talk to you a bit later on. Jeremy Kyle, thank you very much for your tribute.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, the very sad news this afternoon, and I'm the one to be breaking it to you, that our own James Whale has passed, further to his terminal cancer battle. He was, of course, 74 years old. As Jeremy Kyle just said, we knew this was going to happen, but it still doesn't prepare you for the passing of someone so iconic and legendary. Frankly, began his career, of course, back in 1975. Wow, 50 years of broadcast. He pioneered the late-night phone-in, as I've just been rehearsing with Jeremy Kyle. I don't think Talk Radio and Talk TV would even exist, let alone be as it is, if it wasn't for not just people like him, but him specifically. His robust nature, his comedic approach, his boldness, his sharp elbows have really defined particularly what I think this particular station is all about. Yes, we are devastated, as I'm sure you are. The tributes are pouring in. We'll get to some of those shortly, particularly by text. And look, keep them coming, 87222, with your thoughts and words and experiences of James Whale, who has left us today, unfortunately. One man that also knew him is, of course, the last person that he interviewed, which is Nigel Farage. Nigel, thanks for joining me.
No, thank you. And I'm obviously very sad news. Expected, but very sad. But James genuinely was a broadcasting pioneer, a broadcasting legend, the king of late-night phone-ins. I mean, and you mentioned the word comedic a moment ago. I mean, he would often take a position that was entirely contrary to what he really believed in, just for the sake of public debate. And if you think about that in the broader context of what freedom, democracy, society is all about, James was completely a part of it. When he was serious, of course, he really passionately believed in things, and he was grounded in very, very good values. But I first met him in the late 1990s, and the first time I met him, I went in to do a 10 o'clock till 10:30, let's get the newspaper headlines type thing, and I finished up staying on until 1 a.m., and I thought, well, how the hell am I going to get home? And James gave me a lift. And he became a good friend over the years, somebody who I just thoroughly enjoyed being with, somebody who loved life. And of course, he, after the death of his wife, Melinda, he found love again with Nadine. And just everything about the world, about humanity, about debate, all of that was encapsulated in James. So James Whale, R.I.P.
Did you ever have a crossword with him, Nigel?
We disagreed on things very strongly. Yes, of course. I mean, James, underneath...
He didn't care who his audience was. He didn't care who he was with or who he spoke to. If he believed something, or as you say, if he wanted to entice debate, he would certainly do so. He wasn't fazed by anybody, no matter what their profile.
No, he was wholly unafraid of that. And there were things that we agreed strongly on and things we disagreed on, and we'd argue about it over a glass of something, but always in the right spirit. And this is what we've lost. We've lost the art of having really vibrant debate, but at all times respecting the right of the other person to have an opinion.
Yeah. Well, he was certainly the opposite of woke, Nigel, wasn't he?
Oh, well, he certainly woke him, but woke never came into the equation with James at any point in time. And he was, I mean, he loved to provoke debate. And he'd been to America. He'd seen the phenomenon of talk TV in America, and he came back in the sort of middle 70s, and it was Radio Newcastle just over 50 years ago where he started doing it. And boy, look how it's taken off. And yeah, arguably, Talk wouldn't even exist if he hadn't brought this to the country in the first place.
And as we've been saying, I think that's absolutely 100% correct and true. I think he was a pioneer, his sharp elbows, as I keep referencing. And how much of an honour and a privilege was it for you to be his last interview?
Well, I was very touched, very moved to sit with him in that lovely garden in Kent on a beautiful summer's afternoon. And yeah, he wasn't in great condition at all, but he was so determined to make this his last ever broadcast. And I was honoured that he asked me to do it. I felt, to be honest, I felt quite emotional during that interview, in knowing what it meant. But no, very, very honoured that he asked me, and just shows you, doesn't it? Even though he was given less than 2 weeks to live, he still wanted to do that one last interview, which kind of sums him up, really.
Well, it does, because look, he's been ill, I mean, obviously a number of times. I think he suffered with cancer a few years ago, which obviously he got over. Very famously, you know, he publicly declared his condition many months ago, I mean 2 or 3 years ago, on the basis that he was trying to raise the profile of the disease in terms of men in particular. You know what we're like, Nigel, none of us want to go and get checked. We all think that we're fine. None of us want to go to the doctor and so on. So he did his very, very best to raise the profile of the disease in that respect. But I suspect, and I don't know this as fact, but he probably had the bosses here at Talk saying to him, look, just relax, just rest, just chill out. But he was determined, I mean, almost to the last the last few days and weeks, to continue doing his show. And that is the measure of the man, isn't it?
Yeah, he carried on doing his show. In fact, his last Express column appeared this morning, ironically, which is quite extraordinary, in which he wrote that he was very sanguine about dying. You know, he felt that he'd lived the life that he'd lived, and while 74 might not be old, it's not the end of the world. You see, James had a kidney out, and I'm going back now to the mid-1990s. So James had kidney cancer. You know, we're going back almost 30 years. And it's one of the things that we bonded on, because I'd had cancer as a young man as well. So one of the things that sort of joined James and I was an attitude that once you've been through that and gone through that, well, you know what? You might as well just make the most of it. And he loved what he did. He loved broadcasting. He was a total natural. There was no script. Never any script with James or anything like that. Forget about that.
The other thing that you're bonded by, of course, was his almost foray into politics, of course, which it won't surprise anybody to learn that he flirted with the idea of getting more involved in politics itself rather than just being a commentator. He fancied having a stab at being London mayor. Do you remember that?
He did, yes. I was leader of UKIP, and James and I were chatting, and he was very seriously considering running for London mayor. You know, we're going back a few years now. This is back in Ken Livingstone's time, but he had a very, very serious thought about having a go to run at London mayor. In the end, he decided not to do it. But you know, current affairs, debate, humour, acerbic wit. And these were all things that really was part of James. But I mean, you know, what was so wonderful really was sort of the midnight to 1 o'clock hour. When phone-in shows, and I've done a couple myself, phone-in shows often get some quite strange callers, and this was James absolutely at his best.
Well, he encouraged such, of course, and you know, someone should maybe do a tally of the amount of people that he's thrown out of, well, this studio, let alone all of the studios he's ever worked in over the last 50 years or so. I mean, it probably numbers in the hundreds, I suspect, in terms of the people that he's seen out of the door with a thick ear.
Oh, yes. I mean, if people came on with ideas that he thought were utterly moronic, he would not hold back in saying so in no uncertain terms. And that was part of the entertainment value. But you know what? It was never nasty.
No.
It was never vicious. It was always a little bit more in jest than it was anything else. And, no, he'd be very, very sorely missed. But he's left a legacy by, you know, getting this genre going off the ground 50 years ago. That many of us, including you and me right now, have directly benefited from.
No, indeed, and I've recounted my own personal experience with James. I didn't know him well, but I have had various encounters with him in broadcast, particularly when I was trying to plough my first furrow, so to speak, Nigel, on BBC Essex, as it was, many years ago, doing paper reviews. And as I was just saying, I don't know if you heard my brief tribute to him a few minutes ago, I was very, very worried about facing off with James Well indeed. I mean, I'm just a gobby Essex estate agent, as people keep reminding me, but the man was a beautiful individual. I mean, certainly where I'm concerned, he was supportive. You know, I'm not saying he gave me an easy ride as such, but he wasn't ferocious, he wasn't rude, and then of course he pulled me back into this very place, Talk, a few years later, and then it was genuinely a great honour and an amazing experience to be asked to cover one of his shows when I was first starting out as a presenter. And I heard later on that it wasn't just the bosses here, but it was James himself who said, no, give this young Essex upstart a go. I think he'll be all right. And so it was a big chance. You know, he had, I think, the biggest show in terms of the biggest audience on Talk at that very time. And to say I was a little nervous, Nigel, would be an understatement, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, he could be sharp, he could be acerbic, there could be a touch of sarcasm, but there was never any hint of meanness, and I think that's what you're really driving at, and he could be very, very kind to people and very generous to people, and I mean, right throughout broadcasting, newspaper, and don't forget, we had television shows as well over the years. He's a much-loved figure through the industry, and even though we knew that the end wasn't very far away, he still represents a very, very sad loss. And I think there'll be a lot of comment and debate over the next few days just about what a significant role he played in changing the face of British media. But to me, above all, the most important thing is that he was a friend. And somebody that I could chat to and laugh with and joke with and agree with and disagree with and share a glass of wine with. And, my thoughts are with the Dean today in a big, big way.
Well, and I suspect that given your rise in politics and, some people are even tipping you to be the next Prime Minister, Nigel Farage, I suspect that his counsel as such, in terms of you occasionally speaking to him and giving your opinion on something, you would be guaranteed to get back a very straightforward, very common sense and very honest opinion, even though it's you, from him in terms of his candour. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it would. And I'll be honest, he was one of those people very much encouraging me a year ago to get back into politics, to get back into the game. And very much after that last interview in the Garden, he really wanted me to succeed. He wants me to be the next Prime Minister, for me to be the next Prime Minister. And that was, partly through friendship, but also his judgment that basically the country's in real trouble, that the values that he'd lived by, the values that he understood were really under threat, and he thought I was the best bloke to fight that and take that on. So yeah, it's a very thoughtful day for me too.
Thoughtful and sad. We'll all shed our own tears, no doubt. I nearly did a few minutes ago, as you could probably hear, listeners. Very emotional. Nigel Farage, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to pay tribute to James Whale, who passed today. Thank you very much indeed. He boasted, of course, a long list of accolades. Alongside his long-standing broadcasting career, James was also a cancer awareness advocate and an author. However, as I mentioned to Nigel, one thing he regretted was not becoming Mayor of London. Wow, if only that had happened. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I did the MEP thing, of course, for many, many years, although I'm not sure I took it that seriously. We did talk all those years ago about you running for London Mayor. We ended up with Sadiq. It might have been better if we'd had you, James.
That's not my fault, by the way. We were going, my wife at the time were going to LBC, not to LBC, to ITV. And she turned to me and she said, they're taking you seriously. And I said, well, that's good, isn't it? She said, no. You need to decide before you go on air now whether you want to be an MP or you want to be a broadcaster. And I couldn't see why I should, because I'm quite a good broadcaster, and I thought I could be quite a good member of Parliament. And I thought, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And if I do something wrong, if I actually overtread the mark, then sack me or fine me or do something like that. But why should I have freedom taken away?
Well, the man, the legend. I was talking to Jeremy Kyle earlier on, and the irony, Jeremy's still there. Thank you for hanging around, Jezza. The irony of me having to cut you off, Jeremy Kyle, another legend, to go to the news in the middle of a broadcast. I mean, honestly.
Who made that decision?
Well, I just do as I'm told. Did you hear the tributes from Nigel Farage, particularly when it came down to talking about the London Mayor thing? I mean, can you imagine what kind of mayor he would have been? Forget the fact that he would have handed Sadiq Khan his backside, I suspect, in many respects. But can you imagine James Whale as London Mayor? I relish that thought, mate, don't you?
I do, and what's really interesting is with all of these things, when they sink in, the emotion is terrible, and then you think, and I'm sitting listening to Nigel, and I'm smiling. You talk about comedic and passion and broadcasting ability. Yes, he could have been London Mayor. James Whale would have been a success and a legend, frankly, whatever he did, Russell. But the thing about his broadcasting ability that very, very few people, and I mean this, there's few people that are that able to walk into a studio and be as genuinely real and as they are off camera, off mic, as they are on. It is so unique. And I go back to what I said. I used to listen to him. I used to want to be him. I used to lay in bed at night listening to his late night phone shows. And the first time I met him, and he was so nice to me.
Did he genuinely inspire? Did he inspire your career?
Only reason, I mean, anybody who, poor old bugger's to blame for this. Absolutely, 30 years. And last week, I didn't get a chance to go into more detail. We knew he was poorly, and Den and MG and I went down to see him in the hospice, and it was an incredible day. And Nadine was there, and he was watching the birds, and it was just, and I'm not going to say it on air, but he had us howling. I mean, he literally had us howling, because I think what Nigel said and what he pertained to was, I think he'd sort of accepted it. I think he'd got to a point. Of course, he was concerned about Nadine, and we will all do our absolute damnedest, and rightly so, for that amazing lady who's been so stoic. But there's a moment, I think, he was trying to explain to us where it's not that you accept it and you want to pass, but, you know, you start to look back. This man, I heard the word legacy, right? Too many people nowadays, right? What's your legacy? James Whale would be, in my mind, easily in the top 3 or 5 radio presenters in the history of broadcasting. You're absolutely right when you say he was a pioneer. A complete lack of fear, right? When he was on the television, when he was on the radio, I love what Nigel said when he said that, you know, sometimes he'd just do it, but there was never malice. There was no malice or forethought with him. It was. He loved debate. He loved arguments.
But it was also, it wasn't contrived. It wasn't, you know, 4 hours of preparation and thinking about a soundbite in advance. He was inspired. It was.
But I think this is the thing. I think that audiences are far cleverer than a lot of people give them credit for, and I think they absolutely can understand genuine, decent, normal opinion. By that I mean, you could have spent 3 hours talking to James and have a diametrically opposed opinion to his, but you'd have that discussion, like Nigel said, and then you'd go and have a glass of wine. There wasn't any malice, but he was super sharp and super quick and super funny. And, you know, the other day, we always had a phrase between us that he taught me many, many years ago, and I use this all the time. And I guess it's easy. Piers and I were talking about this the other day. When you've had a bit of, you know, you had a bit of heat, James had heat, I've had heat, Piers. It's easier to say this, but it's true. He said to me, you know what, Jez? There's still so many broadcasters that are so scared of losing their jobs that they forget to do their damn jobs. And if you think about James Whale, and that's why I would credit Talk's bosses, Denny and Scott, because this guy, I mean, he cared far more than you would think he cared, but he was brave. He was a brave broadcaster.
And Jez, when we talk about legacy, we are that man's legacy, because what he told you, you have told me. So seriously, this whole thing goes from, you know, should we call him the father of talk broadcast, and filters down to, you know, I have to say, I hate to admit this, but another broadcasting legend, all the way down to a lowly gobby Essex estate agent like me that's trying to have a go at broadcast.
I don't know what he saw in you. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I wish I'd had that conversation with him.
Nor do I.
But I loved what I loved about, you know, I used to listen to his podcast every Saturday with Nadine and read his columns. But he was a mate, and I mean, I'm just devoted and devastated and really trying to hold it together, but it's not about that.
No,
it's
and
about
you know what? Hundreds and hundreds of
remembering.
And I'm going to cut you off again now because it's my show and I can, Jez. But only on the basis that we have hundreds of tributes flooding in to Talk Towers here by text, by phone, by voice notes. We're going to get to those, but we're going to take a break first because I definitely need to have a glass of water, maybe something stronger, and take a breather. Back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my sad duty, I'm afraid, to announce the passing of James Whale. James Whale, OBE, of course. Lots and lots of tributes flooding in. You've heard from Jeremy Kyle, you've heard from Nigel Farage. We're going to hear from Charlie Mullins in a second, who's a very, very good friend of James. And I can't begin to tell you how many text messages there are and calls flooding into the switchboard, which, understandably, you will not be surprised, is melting. Let me just try and get through some of these, and hopefully without me tearing up too much. Heather says, Heather Saul, James Whale is going to be missed by us all. He's well loved by us all. We love our dear friend James with all our hearts. Rest in peace, dear friend James Whale. Our love goes to his wife and his family. Adrian Baird says, you and Mike did the wonderful James Whale proud with your tributes. Like many others, he improved my life by his broadcasting. R.I.P. Thoughts and condolences to his family. Pamela Mitchinson says, so sad to hear about James's passing. I know it wasn't unexpected, but it still hits hard. Legend and gentle giant will be missed and never forgotten. Layla says, saddened to hear the news of James. He was an absolute legend. We are going to hear that word an awful lot. Legend, icon, father of broadcasting. You're going to hear that a lot. Get used to it. Very apt. Nicholas says, my condolences to Lady W, Nadine, and all the team, especially Ash, of course. Those guys have worked together, well, since God was a boy. And so on and so on. We'll get to more and more of these, no doubt, throughout the rest of the day. I'm here till 4 o'clock. Peter Cardwell after this, of course, will carry on with the tributes. But let's speak to Charlie Mullins now, who I'm sure has a few words to say about his friend, his mate, that he was very, very close to. Charlie, thanks for joining me on this very, very sad occasion indeed.
Yeah, hi, Russell. I want to first of all give my condolences to Nadine and his family and all his great friends. Undoubtedly, James was a broadcasting legend. He was also a great friend of mine for over 20 years. A great sense of humour on and off the screen. It's just a one of, and I think we don't really appreciate these people till they're no longer with us. But you know, what a gentleman. I think he played the hard man on the TV, but he had an heart of gold. He set up his own charity, a kidney cancer charity, helped to raise lots of funds for it. Again, he was involved with many other charities. You know, for me, he was a great friend, a great broadcaster.
So he was a proper mate of yours, Charlie?
Of course. I mean, we was very friendly, you know, on and off the screen, probably more off the screen than on. And he was a different character off the screen. But what I loved about the guy was he was straightforward. He didn't put up with no fools, and he told people what he thought of them, if they was wrong or right. And he was just an all-round great guy. And I know you're going to have many people on saying the same thing, but you know, I think I got very close to him after over 20 years, done many shows with him, and always a great sense of humour, but also very to the point when somebody's wrong. I mean, he done a TV ad for me where he was in a bath with 100 ducks. He done various other commercials. He just had a great sense of humour.
And he probably wasn't fazed by that at all, was he? And he's probably
well, look, I was going to say, one year he put our Christmas lights on in Pimlico, and he sat on the toilet outside on the stage, pulled the chain, all snow come down. Not many celebrity people would do that. He came all the way down from Manchester. We went and collected him on that. He was doing a radio show up there. It's one of these people that will never be replaced. There will never be another James Whale.
He was certainly one of the most authentic people that you could ever meet. Probably the most authentic person, I think. He certainly didn't care what people thought about him, did he? Whether he was right or wrong. He had an opinion. He would make sure you knew what that was. But as I think Nigel Farage said as well, Charlie, you know, he was also a nice individual. Yes, you would know if you had an opinion that differed from his, and he did throw a few people out of this studio, as we all know. But actually, there was no malice. You know, he wasn't a nasty individual. I think a lot of what he did, actually, of course, we know was tongue-in-cheek. He was a performer, wasn't he? He was an entertainer.
That's right. I mean, you know, he used to get a lot of stick on the social media, and it never bothered him one bit. It never bothered him at all. You know, he'd still say what he thought. Some people say he was rude, blunt. I think he was just direct. I think he was very honest in what he had to say. And, you know, the greatest time I had with James was when he got his MBE, and we celebrated that at
Charlie, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you what your fondest memories of him, you know, as your good friend were. And that OBE celebration, I remember seeing that in the newspapers, all across social media. Didn't you lent him one of your many cars, I think, didn't you, in terms of the so that you could convey him to the palace? Is that right? So just talk us through that.
That's right. Yes, I lent him a couple of my cars, and he was over the moon with it. So he went along to, I think it was Windsor. That's correct. And I think it was Princess Anne that gave him the medal, and he was as chuffed as anything. And of course he was unwell, and, you know, still to go through that and come along and celebrate with probably 180 people of old sort of radio DJs and broadcasters and people over the years that he'd met on the TV. There was everybody there, just all and everybody. Eamon Holmes, Nigel Farage. There's just so many, you know, to remember. And many of these people have known him from the early days. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to know him for the last 20 years. And he really thanked me for the cars. He absolutely loved it. It was probably, you know, one of his best days of his life.
And Charlie, you've got to tell us what those cars were, because they were pretty lumpy, weren't they?
Yeah, one was a Rolls Royce, and I think the second was a Rolls Royce.
Well, and befitting his status.
Sorry?
Befitting his status. Very appropriate.
Yes, well, why not? I mean, you know, James was a lot more normal and sort of ordinary than what a lot of people think. He never give it large. He never, you know, I'd go up his pub, up in the country pub he was in the Oude Forty, and he was just a normal guy up there. And, you know, you know, he went in this pub for years, and he had birthdays there, weddings there, just charity functions there. And, you know, the guy who owns the pub, Joey, and his family looked after him for forever and ever. But they didn't treat him as a big celebrity. He didn't play the big celebrity, but he was a big celebrity. He was a big character, an amazing sense of humour. And, we knew this day was coming, but it's still a shock.
We did, and we've all tried to prepare ourselves for it. I mean, particularly those that are particularly close to him. Nadine, of course, I'm sure has tried, but that's going to be a pretty challenging thing to do, because, of course, when the likes of today happens, obviously, look, it does take the wind out of your sails, and no more so than for Nadine, but also those around him. I mean, the very, very good friends he's got here at Talk, whether it's Denny Morris, whether it's James, Jeremy Kyle, whether it's Mike Graham and so on. Of course, look,
many friends,
many friends here, and everyone is devastated. So, and you'll have to forgive me if this, if the tributes and this particular presenting slot is a little bit edgy, but hopefully you can all understand why that is. But look, we're getting through it. What other fond memories have you got of the man, Charlie? I mean, particularly, I mean, you've known him 20 odd years, as you say. What would happen when he would get fired from a radio or TV station? I say that with, you know, a big smile on my face, because I think he was kind of proud of himself in terms of his rite of passage, that he would often fall out with, not here, but would fall out with, you know, broadcast bosses, because he was so adept at speaking his mind. I mean, were you ever subject to any of those situations?
Well, I've seen him do it. I mean, you know, me and him never had no fallouts. I mean, but he would still say if he thought I was wrong, I shouldn't have said this. He was very direct, and yeah, I've seen him, you know, on you know, the talkTV there, where he's got rid of guests that are proper pests and nuisances and idiots. Really, he just didn't put up with fools, and I think that's you know, one of the things now. Too many people have to put up with some of these idiots that come on the TV and start digging him out. But he just wouldn't have none of it. He'd just say, "Get out, remove. This is my show," and that's what I loved about the guy. And, you know, right up until the end, I think I see him a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, even then he turned up at a celebration party just before he'd done the interview with Nigel Farage. And he wasn't in a good way. He hasn't been in a good way for a long time. And I mean, to keep going, what he'd done is amazing. And the amount of people that he's helped with his weekly podcast, himself and Nadine, regarding suffering with cancer.
And raising the awareness of it. And hopefully, Charlie...
And he did not stop.
And hopefully, Charlie, as a consequence, you know, if we can take, you know, any positive out of this, it's that some of us fellas actually might be a little bit more humble when it comes to such things. And if you've got something that isn't quite right, a feeling, a lump or whatever, you may well now, as a consequence, because of that profile raising, decide to go and get it checked out. Charlie Mullins, look, thank you very much indeed for taking the time. Lovely tribute. I know he's a very, very good friend of yours. We're going to take another break now, and after this, ironically, Ian Collins.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk, in for Ian Collins, but we are now going to speak to Ian Collins for obvious reasons. Due to the news just this afternoon that our good friend and broadcasting colleague James Whale passed today, further to his long battle with cancer. Ian, yeah, I guess, look, the irony of you coming on now as my guest and I'm covering your show, but you knew James well, Ian, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Hiya, Russell. I knew him for about 30 years. I was just working it out, actually, when when we heard this news. And he said, I spoke to him around about 6 days ago when he was in the hospice. And he said, make sure you're on air when the news breaks. And, of course, I wasn't on air when the news broke.
Well, you nearly were. It's your show.
Yeah, I nearly was, yeah. But he would have found that quite funny, actually. And the strange thing is, I was just looking, and this is just sort of the story of James and kind of what he was about and what he represented in this genre of broadcasting. And you've been playing some of the clips I've noticed since you've been on air. What we do now at Talk, visualizing radio and trend setting that, now the industry across the board tries to copy what we've been doing for a good while now. But James, as a kind of lone standout character in this genre, was doing this way back. I first heard about James through a mate who lived in an area when ITV was all broken up into different regions, and the James Whale radio show, which was his radio air show, which was then broadcast on television. But you could only see it firstly in that region, and then it spread across the regions. And a mate of mine said, you've got to look at this guy. He said, he's unbelievable. And he used to send me the VHS tapes of this guy called James. Well, I couldn't believe it. He had just all these mad guests on, great musicians, top guests, oddballs, phone-ins. He was doing the lot from
I've used the word in pioneer a number of times. I mean, did you think he was our own version of Howard Stern? I mean, Howard Stern's probably, equally famous globally in terms of, because no one's used this term yet, and I'm not sure it's appropriate or not, but I think James would like this. The original shock jock.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. At that time, regional radio was kind of broken up into, obviously, I don't know how many parts across the country, 30, 40 radio stations, and a lot of them specialised in having sort of late-night phone-ins. That became a sort of staple. 10 o'clock at night, they all did it. But only a few of them ever really stood out. But the one that really jumps out to everybody in the industry, which is why James went from being local to national, was James Whale. And he was doing this show and cutting people off and having fun. And the kind of humour of the time is, a lot of the woke brigade would go absolutely, tonto these days with some of the stuff that went on and how he got away with it. But it was brilliant. It was in context. And he did it really easily. And he said to me a load of times afterwards that he never actually found it that easy in some respects, because he said he sort of puts on a bravado that he kind of very nicely melts into. And Charlie Mullins was just making the point that, off-air he was a different character. I mean, James was very opinionated still.
But he was, as I said to Charlie, he's a performer, he's an entertainer. I mean, maybe he turned himself on air into a little bit of a caricature of himself, perhaps, for the purposes of entertaining. And he did. He entertained the bloody nation, and he's done it for 50 years.
Absolutely. That's exactly what he did. He was entertaining. And even if he had that, in our industry, the real key to the greatest are those that have people listening to them, whether they like them or not. And that's exactly what he had. So even people that would say, I can't stand that James Whale, bloody big mouth and all the rest of it, never lets people get their say, cuts them off when he disagrees, and all that kind. But they still listened. And that was the key, really. He had that sort of mesmeric quality that very few people have, that even if you couldn't stand any of his views, and he upset a lot of people over things like lockdowns and COVID and all the rest of it, but you still listen to the guy.
Yeah, and I think, but Ian, people need to,
he was entertaining.
People need to realise that there was no script, there was no auto cue, there was no sitting there for 4 hours preparing a nice soundbite for 11 minutes into the show or 20 minutes before the show ended. This was completely and utterly instinctive. He was he may have been a bit of a caricature, I think, sometimes, maybe, you know, over-egged things for the purposes of entertainment because he was an entertainer. But this was natural. It was instinctive. It was him, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was totally that. I mean, he never, ever wrote anything down. He never read, apart from when he was asked to read out something that was a commercial or a promotion for another show.
And he probably ad-lib around that.
Did.
He'd probably ad-lib around that.
And even ad-lib around that. Yeah, sometimes got in trouble for some of that as well, which was part of the kind of delight of his character, that he sort of just didn't care. The other thing that he could do, he could light up a switchboard half an hour before he came on air, so people were calling even before the show started, much to the annoyance of whoever was on before him, who was trying to get
you would never want,
going or something.
You would never want, and maybe you were one of these people, you would never want to be on the show after him, because he'd build up an audience for you to lose, as they say.
Well, absolutely.
I don't mean you specifically, Ian, by the way. I mean people generally.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, when I started in national radio, it was, you know, for about 5 years, we were on After James, and we used to do these funny I'd go into the studio and do the handover thing, you know, which we still do, of course. And they would sometimes go on forever, and you never knew who was going to be in there. It could be Cleo Roccos from the Kenny Everett Show. It could be Peter Purvis from Blue Peter. It could be Terry Waite, the hostage. I mean, all these different people that were in there. You never knew who was going to be there. Alistair Campbell could be there. I mean, it was just madness. And then, of course, we had to do a show afterwards. And although it was a slightly different show, we were still picking up our switchboard. Would still be people going, off air, can we speak to James, please? And they'd have to go, no, he actually finished 45 minutes ago, but people...
He should, of course, Ian, he's remembered as a radio guy, a radio broadcaster, that shock jock, if it's an appropriate thing to say. But, of course, you know, he had a huge television career. I mean, I remember coming back from the pub when I was about 18 or 19 years old, and he was on Channel 4 at 1 o'clock in the morning. And, of course, he used to have this live audience and would rev them up and would, kind of dispense people if he didn't agree with them, you know, in a very, very, a very straightforward way, should we say. And he used to get thrown off a lot of those shows. You know, he got fired a few times, as I've said, and I say that as a tribute. I say that because I think he was the ultimate renegade, the ultimate rebel, and arguably the ultimate advocate of freedom of speech. I mean, look where we are now in that regard, Ian. I mean, if ever there's an advert for freedom of speech, it's James Whale OBE.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was exactly that kind of character. And what's interesting, when he realised that his cancer was terminal, and, you know, he never hid any of that, he never felt sorry for himself. And I think that, and it's because I think we all think there that for the grace of God, and, you know, God, that was me, I'll be falling apart. And he never did. And Kevin O'Sullivan always said he was the most well-looking terminal cancer patient anyone's ever seen. You know what it was like, Russell, when you bumped into him. He just looked great forever. Even when I spoke to him, you know, about a week ago, because he could hardly speak at this point, he was really down to a whisper, you know, and he answered. I called him and he didn't pick up to start, and he rang me back about 2 minutes later, and I said, "Is that Bob Harris?" And he just started laughing, which apparently isn't the thing to do when someone's in that position, because he then started coughing, because I thought, oh my God. And he said, "You're going to finish me off at this moment, mate." And he carried that humour with
the gallows humour.
I know,
but you wouldn't expect it from. Well, you would expect it from him because he was authentic and robust. Ian Collins, I've got another 15 minutes of your show. I'm going to leave it there if you don't mind, because we've got lots of calls and texts to get. So that's Ian Collins there, who's back tomorrow. Got some other calls, as I understand it. Lots and lots of you paying tribute, texting on 87222, and of course the word talk, and indeed calling on 0344 499 1000. Leave your voice notes, even if we don't have time to get to them all. You will know that you have laid down, so to speak, a voice note in tribute to the absolute icon, the legend, the father of talk broadcasting, and indeed the father of this station, really, James Whale, who's passed away today. Let me just read you a text tribute, actually. Steve Chandler, I mean, and there are hundreds of these, by the way. Forgive me if I don't read all of them out, but you'll understand why. Steve Chandler says, "I remember seeing James sitting in a pub restaurant once in the countryside. I said to my wife, 'That's James Whale over there.' And she said, 'Well, you should go over and say hello to him.' And I said, 'I don't want to be the end of a let's just say rollicking, or it rhymes with rollicking. I preferred hearing his callers getting it.' And Steve says, 'I wish I had gone over now. R.I.P. James.' More of this when we come back. I'm Russell Quirk, and this is Talk.
a largely uncritical documentary. I mean, they didn't sort of look into the harms that she was doing in any significant way. They didn't interview any of the men who were using her, and I do say using. I mean, essentially, they put their penises inside her for 45 seconds and called it sex. I mean, it was absolutely grotesque.
I mean, lucky her. I have to say, I mean, you are just reducing yourself to just. I'm sorry. You're just a number of holes at that point, aren't you? You're not a human being in any meaningful way when you're doing that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, welcome back on this very, very sad afternoon. We're paying tribute to James Whale of this parish, who has passed away today at the age of 75 after his long battle with cancer. Lots of tributes. We've heard from Nigel Farage and Charlie Mullins, Ian Collins. And now, and this won't be easy for him or for me, we're going to talk to Ash Gould, who, of course, is the long-time co-host of James Whale on this channel. Ash, dare I ask how you're feeling this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm all right, man. It's a bit of a shock, isn't it? I mean, we're all expecting it, and yeah, it's a tough one, man. How
long did you work with him, Ash?
30 years, yeah.
So you probably knew him. You knew him in broadcast terms probably longer than most.
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah, and it was a great ride. I mean, I remember when I first got to work with him, they said we want you to do work with James Whale, and obviously, because when I was 18, I used to watch the show on the TV, and I thought, great, this would be exciting. And it turned out it was exciting, and it was we had a great chemistry, and it just worked, didn't it?
You must have been frightened out of your life, Ash Gould, weren't you? The first time they said to you, come and work with James Whale, and you walked into that studio and the man himself was there and you had to do a show with him. But then you carried on working with him. You managed to do that for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely didn't have matching personalities, but we had... can you still see me? Yeah. But people are calling me quite a lot. But I think because of our different personalities is why it worked really well. Do you know what I mean? We sort of.
So you think you were yin to his yang, or the other way around?
Yeah, exactly. I think we sort of had a good balance between us, and so it worked out well. Do you know?
Did he ever get genuinely annoyed with you, Ash, or vice versa?
No. I mean,
because you seem to be a fantastic double act.
I mean. 30 years, you're going to have, little arguments, but nothing major, nothing nasty or anything. But yeah, obviously you have little disagreements, but no problems.
Yeah.
He was different on air and off air, although, he used to wind himself up when he was on air, so it would sort of be real, like a method actor in a way.
Because he didn't suffer falls lightly.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How many people do you think the pair of you have thrown out of TV and radio studios across the nation over the last 30 years?
Well, I mean, it was mainly him. I just joined in after. Yeah, he probably about...
I think you could handle yourself, Ash Gould. I think it's fair to say.
I could if necessary, but I don't know. It's probably in three figures, I would have thought, at least.
Yeah, and he's kind of famous for that. But again, I think not performatively. I think, I mean, again, you know better than most. I think he genuinely used to get just cheesed off with people if they wouldn't answer a question, if they were a politician or if they were a celebrity that was trying to have their 15 minutes of fame at his expense, or they said something that was stupid. He was the archetypal individual to say, no, I'm not having it, off you go, out.
Yeah,
and he meant it. He meant it.
Yeah, I suppose because he saw his show, he was possessive of his show, you know what I mean? It's like his house, so I suppose his dad was a landlord in King's Cross and I never knew him because he died when he was quite young, his dad, but he used to throw people out the pub, and I think he got a lot from his dad, and his mum was Welsh and quite stern. She was a ballet dancer, a professional. So she was quite stern from South Wales, and I think so he sort of got it like that. And it was his domain, and if he didn't like you, he'd say get out. And,
no,
and you know, he did mean it at the time. He would always mean it, you know.
It's and people always say this in tribute in these situations, and they use, as we've already done several times in the last hour or two, they use these tribute-like words, you know, icon, legend, and so on. But I'm not sure there is genuinely anyone else anywhere in broadcast like James Whale.
No, he was definitely unique, wasn't he? And there's a lot of icons. We saw Steve Wright, didn't we, about a year or two ago, and he was one of the top sort of 5 people, wasn't he? And he was the best at what he did. You know, he would get an audience. People would listen because, you know, you don't know what's going to happen next. So that's what worked really well.
And Ash, obviously, I could talk to you about this on and on and on, because the man has such a rich history as a career. There's lots and lots to talk about. But what do you think his legacy is going to be?
I think just being a real broadcaster, not flanneling around or saying things for the sake of it. You have to, and I think that's the secret of being a broadcaster, is that you say it from your heart. You can't contrive stuff. So
and do you
that's
think...
what it'd be. And loads of people I've met have said I got into broadcasting. I mean, you had Jeremy Kyle on earlier, and loads of people have said to me, I got in, he's one of my heroes, this is why I'm doing.
Well, he gave me a start, and again, I don't want to be one of these people, as I'm sure we'll see on social media, that says, yes, I knew him, and here's a picture of me and him together. It shouldn't be about others. It's absolutely about James. But he, I guess, gave you a start in this industry. He certainly contributed to giving me a start, you know, giving me the opportunity. He didn't frighten me off too much when I was doing paper reviews with him back in the day at BBC Essex. And I think the first show I ever did, or one of the first shows I ever did, was with him and with you, Ash, if you remember.
Oh, wow.
And I think, somehow we didn't come to blows, did we? You and I, we got on.
No.
I was definitely, as one texter, actually, I remember that night, one texter tried to explain to us all here that I was no replacement for James Whale. Go figure. No, I didn't think I was. But he wasn't there. You needed a wingman as such, and there I was. But no, he was...
But he was, you know, he liked you. If he liked people, then he, you know, it would just come across. But he was a nice, you know, he was a cuddly guy off air. You know, people think he was like that. He was actually a very friendly, warm person.
He was lovely. So talk to us about some of the things that you really remember as kind of iconic standout moments, you know, whether it's guests, whether it's interviews. Talk to us about some of the things.
There's so many. I mean, we had all the emergency services over the years, police, fire brigade, ambulance, and even the bomb squad came. That was a big moment, I think.
The bomb squad?
Yeah, well, someone sent a fake bomb, but it looked real, you know.
What, into the studio?
Yeah, and it was behind us, and the police cleared the whole building. It was when we were in Oxford Street, 76 Oxford Street. And Wales said, no, we're not leaving because we were on air. So me and him were just the only people in the building. The police said, all right, but you can't leave. Anyway, I took the opportunity to go and have a fag on the stairs, and I went out, and the police were there, and they said, right, you can't go back in. So he was sort of left. You know, and he was technically not very good, you know. So he was just there, stuck at the microphone.
But he was determined not to go, despite the fact that there could have been a very real bomb in the building. Well, that's another measure of the man, isn't it?
Well, it was like next to me, not him. So
you would have shielded him from it.
I would have been the shielding force of it. So.
And who are some of the most famous people that you interviewed, you and him together? Just rattle through some.
I mean, we had you've had all people on. We had. We had Steven Seagal, although he sounded a bit like he was stoned, I think. I don't know, he was a bit weird. He came on and goes, Steven Seagal, hello. And he went, hello. And then he went, and he sort of just going, yeah, just answering. And he just cut him up and went, thank you, Steven Seagal. We had Ray Mansour.
Not fazed by his fame at all.
No, he wasn't. I mean, I think that was because, you know, he'd done his TV show for years and he'd met everyone. He interviewed Spike Milligan. He'd interviewed everyone, knew him pretty much from that TV show.
And do you think that's why he was so, not just outspoken, but so authentic? Because he wasn't fazed by it, because he had met everybody.
Yeah.
He had interviewed everybody. Yeah.
That was just him anyway, you know what I mean? He was authentic anyway, so he wasn't fazed by people.
When did you last speak to him, Ash?
I was going to go down today. I phoned yesterday and I said, Whale, I'm coming down to the hospice. And then I got a call back it said James Whale. I thought, he's called me, and it was his wife saying, he was in the hospice. They'd given him a lot of drugs, and, they did a great job because he was never in any stress or pain. And she said he's semi-conscious. So she put me on speakerphone, and I did a little spiel on the phone. I was saying, all this and that. And she said he could hear, and he smiled. So that was nice that I got to talk to him. But obviously I couldn't go down today, and obviously he's gone today anyway. So,
Ash, look, thank you for taking the time and for having the bravery, frankly, to come on and talk about your good mate James Whale, who has passed today. Ash Gould there, long